Accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Yeah, we are Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name, of course, Evan Jansen. The show is always live, broadcast from the studios right here in Auckland Park. Every weekday morning between 9 and 12. We also stream live on YouTube. You can watch us back later in the day on demand. Now, our question of the day deals with sugar tax and obesity. That's our theme for the day as well. Now, the question is there. Is sugar tax an answer to South Africa's obesity problem? Yes, we're one of the most obese nations on the planet. We'll speak to the WHO shortly about obesity in general in the world. But before we get there, let's get the morning's news with Elvis.
Thank you, Evan. Let's take a look at all your headlines. The World Health Organization has declared the Zika virus a global health emergency. More than 200 people are without shelter after several informal structures in Mandela Park at Houtbaai in the Cape Peninsula were destroyed by fire. And protesting workers at the Tshwane University of Technology say they will continue with their action until the institution's management meets with them, as other tertiary institutions are busy with Orientation Week. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. Very good morning to you, Kendall.
Good morning, Elvis. Thank you very much, and good morning to you too as well. This is what we've got for you in the sports later today. Wheelchair tennis star Lucas Sithole arrives back from the Australian Open to a hero's welcome after winning the quad doubles title. And Manchester City sealed the deal of the transfer window as they announced that Pep Guardiola will be taking over from Pellegrini in July. All this is Brazil, the host of the Rio 2016 Olympic Games later this year, say that Zika poses minimal threat to Olympic athletes and visitors. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. Our top story this morning. The World Health Organization has declared the Zika virus a global health emergency. The disease, which has spread rapidly, is linked to thousands of birth defects in Brazil. WHO Director General Margaret Chan says an international coordinated response is needed, although restrictions on travel or trade are not necessary.
I am now declaring that the recent cluster of microcephaly and other neurological abnormalities reported in Latin America, following a similar cluster of French Polynesia in 2014, constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. As a precautionary measure, and because of the association, a coordinated international response is needed to improve surveillance, the detection of infections, congenital malformations, the detection of neurological complications, to intensify the control of mosquito populations, and to expedite the development of diagnostic tests and vaccines to protect people at risk.
More than 200 people are without shelter. In fact, 300 people are without shelter, and after several informal structures in Mandela Park at Houtbaai in the Cape Peninsula were destroyed by fire. No injuries have been reported, and the cause of the blaze is not yet known. 5 fire trucks and 23 firefighters responded to the flames. More than 60 wood and iron structures were gutted. The city's Human Settlements Department says it's providing fire kits for residents to rebuild their shacks. The South African Red Cross Society is also expected to provide hot meals and blankets for those in need. About 47 people have been injured after a bus overturned on the N8 between Bloemfontein and Botshabelo in the Free State. 9 of the occupants sustained serious injuries. The interstate bus driver lost control while en route to Bloemfontein. Some passengers say the bus was travelling at high speed when the accident happened.
We've got about 47 patients, which we've already transported. The most serious one, the priority 2 patients, there was 9 patients that's already been stabilised and been transported to the local hospitals, close hospitals, provincial hospitals. And then also the rest of the patients are priority 3, not very injured. Luckily, there's nobody been trapped or passed away on scene, but that's what we've got so far. On this stage, it's a very sensitive place where the accident happened, so we're busy with the incident command structure.
Testing workers at the Tshwane University of Technology say they will continue with their action until the institution's management meets with them. Yesterday, police had to fire stun grenades as the workers blocked students' access to the campus. Higher Education Minister Bladen Zamande has blamed political opportunists for hijacking student and worker protests at universities.
Steadfast in their demand for more money and permanent jobs. They barred students from accessing the campus, and when police tried to assist them, chaos. More scuffles between police and the EFF Student Command.
No, but I'm respecting you.
No one is going to work here, and those who defy us, we will deal with them. Some students baffled and destitute.
Workers have vowed to shut down all campuses if their demands are not met. But the start of the academic year plunged into disarray.
It's a mess inside. People are not even working. We've been coming here since 4 a.m.
Last week, these workers rejected a 5,000 rand wage increase and outsourcing over 3 years.
It is our position as management and organized labor and the students that we have reflected quite critically on the plight of our workers, and this is the best that we can do for our workers.
Higher Education blames a third force for the class disruptions.
We think what's happening at the TUT is some political parties who are launching their local government elections campaign.
Nzimande urged workers to return to work. Criselda Lewis, SABC News, in Pretoria.
Well, that's your news for now. But remember, we do have a question for you, and that relates to obesity here in South Africa, and of course the sugar tax that goes hand in hand with that. Now, the question that we pose to you is sugar tax an answer to South Africa's obesity problems that we have? Well, that's on the back of a number of interviews that we'll have today to highlight the issue. You can send your comments to the Facebook page as well as to the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. Yeben.
Yeah, thank you. Very good morning, and let's get straight into that question now. At least 41 million children under the age of 5 are obese or overweight globally, with the greatest rise in the number of children being obese or overweight coming from low and middle income countries. According to the recent World Health Organization report, many children are growing up today in environments encouraging weight gain and obesity. The marketing of unhealthy foods and non-alcoholic beverages was identified as a major factor in the increase in numbers of children being overweight and obese, particularly in the developing world. Now, to unpack this report a little bit further, in our Pretoria studio, we're joined by Dr. Sarah Louise Barber from WHO South Africa. Very good morning to you, Dr. Barber. Thanks for joining us once again.
Good morning to you, Eben. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a very concerning report, not just for South Africa, but for the world. Can you give us a breakdown of the sort of features of this report?
Well, the report aims to highlight the problem of obesity and overweight in children, particularly children under 5, which, as you have just mentioned, has increased dramatically. And this increase is being driven by low and middle income countries. The problem, as you have already stated, is really the environment. We're living in environments where there are more and more processed foods. These processed foods are cheaper in many cases than healthier alternatives. We have aggressive and sophisticated marketing techniques, particularly towards children, to increase consumption of these energy-dense, high-fat, high-sugar foods. As well as we have an environment where people have insufficient information to make food choices. So, for example, the nutrition labeling tends to be small, difficult to read, and even more difficult to interpret. So these factors have really created an environment that we call an obesogenic environment, and an environment that encourages increased consumptions of foods that are unhealthy.
Tell us about the impact on the quality of life that obesity brings to a young child, but also later in life.
That's right. I think a young child who is obese finds it very difficult. Frequently, they don't access the weight management services that they need. They could be bullied at school. And frequently, children who are overweight become overweight and continue to be overweight and obese during adolescence and adulthood. And this has very serious health consequences. We see that these kind of consequences could include increased cardiovascular disease, increased heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, as well as some cancers, as well as degenerative joint diseases. So the health consequences are very, very severe.
What about the economic burden of this and the diseases that go with it?
Well, that's right. I think we have to look at the health costs involved in treating these chronic diseases, particularly diabetes and hypertension. They cause a very high burden to the health systems, as well as the individuals who have to continually pay for medical treatment for the rest of their lives. So the costs are severe to the health of the individuals as well as the communities and societies as a whole. When people are sick, they are less productive. They may have higher absenteeism and have lower quality of life.
Dr. Barber, we see that the problem is escalating in the developing world, if one can generalize like that. What does that say about what's happening in the developing world? Do you see an issue with parenting, maybe?
Well, I think what the report emphasizes is less the individual behaviors as opposed to the environment. What we've done is create environments that promotes unhealthy behaviors. We have communities, for example, in which people can't exercise. And this is one of the major recommendations of the report, to create an environment where it's easy for people to make healthy choices. It's easy for people to choose healthy food. It's easy for individuals to go out into their communities. They have parks, they have bike paths, they can exercise easily. And it's part and parcel of a normal environment, living environment.
The report also mentioned that the political will and commitment can help immediately to alleviate this challenge. How so?
Well, one of the major recommendations, two of the major recommendations, in fact, are about increasing the availability of healthy foods and reducing the availability of unhealthy foods. So this involves things like price and tax measures, as you mentioned. We can use price and tax measures. When you tax a product, its price increases, so this essentially becomes less affordable. So there are many initiatives to promote taxes, sales taxes, value-added taxes or excises on sugar drinks, on candies, on confections, so that these products are less affordable and less available. At the same time, when you tax something, you do generate revenues, and these revenues can be used to subsidize, for example, the production of fruits and vegetables.
Dr. Barber, comprehensive as always. Thank you very much for putting us in the picture. It's not always a picture that one wants to see. 41 million children around the world under the age of 5 are obese or overweight. here in South Africa, we have 9 million people that are obese or overweight. It's an economic problem, a social problem, and one that hopefully we can all address by changing the environment, as the WHO's South African representative, Dr. Sarah Louise Barber, just told us. But we're going to continue with this theme throughout the morning here on Newsroom. Let's go over to Elvis now, who's got more.
Now that is the big picture, excuse the pun, but it is big. Priceless South Africa, a research institute based in the Public Health Department at Wits University, released a study that says South Africa will have more than 9 million obese people by 2017. That's 9 million. Now the study says this will happen if South Africans do not reduce their intake of cool drinks and sweet beverages. In 2012, South Africa hit the mark of 8 million obese people in the continent and making it the most obese nation on the African continent. Now, joining us in studio, we are joined by Priceless SA Research Institute at Wits University Deputy Director Aviva Tugendhaft. A very good morning to you and welcome, Aviva.
Morning, Elvis. Thanks for having me.
First and foremost, tell me what Priceless stands for.
It's a bit of a mouthful. Stands for Priority Cost-Effective Lessons for System Strengthening. But in short, we're a research institution and we look at what we call best buys for health. Those interventions that will give you good value for money, good bang for your buck, that can save the most lives at a reasonable cost and to help the country set better priorities for health.
Well, that sounds fantastic, but this study that says that 9 million people will be obese by 2017 in South Africa if we don't cut our intake of sugar. What's the causes of this growing number that we've seen? Is it only because of sugar intake of cold drinks?
No, certainly not. It's multiple factors. As Dr. Barber was just talking about, there are numerous things that impact this, but the food environment is a big factor, and specifically sugar. Our increase in sugar has really impacted this growing number of obesity. And we specifically looked at sugar-sweetened beverages in this study because that has also grown, consumption has grown, and they are particularly high in sugar, about 8 teaspoons in your average 330 ml. And we've looked at the impact of increasing consumption and the impact on obesity as sales grow.
Now, today we're talking about the sugar tax. Is that perhaps the solution or the panacea for South Africa in terms of turning this around?
It's certainly part of the solution. We did another study that showed if we put a 20% tax in place, we could reduce the number of obese by about 250,000, which is quite significant. But it needs to be part as well of a bigger, broader approach. It's a very cost-effective intervention, but we need to address all factors. We need things like easy-to-understand food labeling. We need advertising regulations. We need better interventions in our schools and at the workplace.
Food labeling, why is that so important?
It's very difficult for consumers to understand what they are actually eating and drinking. The labels are very confusing. There is a draft labeling regulation, which the Department of Health tabled last year. It hasn't been approved yet, but we would like to see simpler labels on the front of packages that we can look at. They can be a symbol, and we can tell immediately how high the sugar content or other contents are.
Now, for instance, in Mexico, they managed to reduce soda sales by 10% in 2015. More people were drinking water in that country, we believe. Is this possible here in South Africa? We believe in some provinces people don't drink water.
Sure. Challenging, but as in Mexico, challenging as well. And actually, those figures are now up to 12% decrease.
Yes.
And interestingly, we see the biggest decrease in Mexico in the lower socioeconomic groups. They're decreased by almost 17%, and those groups were also drinking more water. So it's not just about a tax. It's accompanied by a very strong public health campaign, which they did in Mexico, promoting why water is better, why sugar is bad. And it's this whole comprehensive approach that really is having a huge impact in Mexico.
So let's combine that and look at all the factors. So what do we need to do? We need to drink less sugar, drink more water. Break it down for us.
Sure. Drink less sugar. First, we need to know that there is high sugar content in a lot of these drinks, even fruit juices, so not only your cold drinks. We need to drink less of them. We need to drink more water. We need clearer, simpler labeling on the products so we know what there is in them. We need worksite and school interventions where healthier products are made easily available. We want the healthy choice to become the easier choice, and currently the food environment makes it very difficult. We have advertising that really targets especially low and middle income countries where it's growing, targeting sugar-sweetened beverage consumption. So we need advertising regulations as well.
Let's look at this particular graphic that is being shown here. 31%, so 31.5%, that is due to unsafe sex. That's the risk factor for early death. Let's look at the alcohol, there's tobacco, there's excess body weight. That accounts for 2.9%. Childhood and maternal underweight, that is for 2.7%. Now, if you look at all these things, these are the things, and also look at the last one, diabetes, of course, a high risk factor there as well. So these are the things combined that can contribute to you not living a very healthy and long life.
Sure, and you made a good point. It's all these things combined, and being overweight and especially obese puts you at very high risk for diabetes, high blood pressure, and it's having a significant impact on the population. We have 50 cases of amputations due to diabetes per week, 150 cases of diabetic blindness. So it's not only deaths, it's also disabilities, which are placing a huge financial burden on families and on the country.
Mm-hmm. And then just lastly, let's just go back to labels very briefly. So even if the labels are more readable and people can understand it, some of those titles and that you have on those labels, people won't understand it. How do we get around that?
The solution is potentially a symbol that everybody can understand.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a symbol on the bottle or on the can that says this has got 10% sugar or whatever it might be.
Or a traffic light that shows red for high, green for medium, amber for green for low, and amber for medium.
Wonderful. Aviva, thank you so much for joining us here in studio and talk to us about the potential 9 million people that can be obese here in South Africa and how you can prevent it. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Priceless SA Research Institute at Wits University's Deputy Director, Aviva Tugendhaft. Eben.
Thanks, Alvis. Yeah, very interesting. I like the traffic light principle. That could work. Something that we would all understand here in South Africa. But then again, we go over so many red lights. It's very difficult. Anyhow, the other news going on here in South Africa, hundreds of commuters were, left stranded yesterday. It caused chaos at Umlazi, south of Durban, all the way into the city as drivers complained about their unpaid salaries and bonuses. They just left the buses all over the roads, causing traffic chaos. But people weren't happy on social media. Let's have a look at what some people had to say. I'm sure there were some pictures. This one on SAFM says, long queues are visible at taxi ranks in Umlazi, south of Durban, as the strike by municipal bus drivers enters its second day today. So it's continuing today, and it's still causing consternation. Ngiwe says, hundreds of commuters in Umlazi and Phoenix have been left stranded as the bus drivers' strike enters its second day now. Yes, it still continues to cause havoc there. Private bus operators on Maharagama, Gale, Matara and Southern Expressway have commenced a strike this morning. Do we have any pictures of the buses? Bus driver strike made me drive to Umlazi to Spingo in a circle for 3 hours, says Tulisile. We don't have any pictures of the bus strike. Well, it's interesting pictures. Very easy for you to have a look at them. Buses parked sideways across the road, etc., causing mayhem in and around Durban. Anyhow, let's take a look now at the front pages from around the globe. We'll start in Europe, where the Times says the Texas governor, Ted Cruz, won the Republican Iowa caucus last night, edging Donald Trump into an unexpected and first humbling defeat. Then we move to Iran, where the Tehran Times reports that the government says Iran can now access more than $100 billion in frozen assets after the implementation of a nuclear agreement last month. Also, the New York International Times reports that the World Health Organization declared the Zika virus and its suspected link to birth defects an international public health emergency yesterday, a rare move that signals the seriousness of the outbreak and gives countries new tools to fight it. Now let's take a look at what's happening in the courts here in South Africa today. We started in Johannesburg, where the case of the two murder suspects who allegedly stabbed their cousins and a baby before placing the bodies in the bathtub are expected to appear in the Palm Ridge Magistrates Court. Then in Port Elizabeth, where the bail hearing of 5 deaf learners from the Ifata School for the Deaf expected to continue there. The 5 youths were arrested for the murder of the school's deputy principal. Then further south in the Western Cape, a High Court application to allow the family of US rapper and actor Yassine Bey, who's better known as Mos Def, to stay indefinitely will be heard in the High Court today. Mos Def was arrested earlier this month after it was discovered that he didn't have a valid passport. Also in the Western Cape today, the DA is asking the High Court to order that the Deputy National Director of Public Prosecutions, Nomlobo Jiba, be suspended and subjected to a disciplinary inquiry. This comes after numerous complaints from the DA about her failing her duties. That's what's on the court diary today. Time for us now to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue with a question, and our question today is a tough one. Is sugar tax, there we go, sugar tax, the answer to South Africa's obesity problem? Yes, we are one of the most obese nations on the planet. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Get all the latest news from the SABC's online news services on our website. Breaking news and in-depth coverage of everything from business, sports to politics and lifestyle. Catch the top news clips and watch live streaming of major news events on the SABC News YouTube channel whenever. Stay connected on the SABC News Facebook page and have your say on news that matters to you. And for the latest headlines and live updates from our reporters, follow us on Twitter. SABC Digital News, anytime, anywhere.
Didier Drogba, a footballer from Ivory Coast, was named as the third most influential celebrity in Africa.
Where I saw him display, he's a very nice player. He always make an impact.
Drogba donated his $5 million endorsement fee to the construction of a hospital in Abidjan.
Well, there are some lesser-known football stars in the continent that you haven't met.
Really?
And are deserving of more attention.
I think we will do better.
The Journal, every Saturday at 1:30 on SABC News.
Welcome back. You're still with Newsroom now. The Democratic Alliance says the government's plan to hike taxes on sugar-sweetened drinks by 20% will lead to an increase in food prices. Now, the theory is the tax would make the cost of cool drinks or sweet drinks higher, making them less affordable and thus less appealing to consumers. This move by the government is to get South Africans to take in less sugary substances that lead to obesity and type 2 diabetes. Now, we just heard what the World Health Organization said what the researchers told Elvis. Now, to tell us a little bit more about sugar tax per se, we joined in studio this morning by Keith Engel. He's the CEO of the South African Institute of Tax. Very good morning to you, Keith. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for letting me be here. Yes.
Fantastic. I think it would be appropriate if you could maybe demystify sugar tax a little bit for us. What it is, how it works, and what its aims are, I would think.
Yeah. Well, it's a fairly simple tax. It's an excise tax. Excise taxes are basically behavioral taxes. So we have tobacco, we have alcohol, and we're all
sin taxes.
Just the answer. Now the question is when you buy something, you just add the charge. Now the question is, where do you add the charge? Do you add a charge at the consumer level when you go and buy it in the store, like a value-added tax, or do you charge it down the stream when the business buys the sugar? So it's really a very simple tax. It's a gross purchase tax. That's all it is.
Now, we just spoke to Wits University. Their research department says if 20% is added, sugar tax, it'll it'll bring obesity numbers down in South Africa. How do you view this kind of thing? And if I could ask you to, in that vein, talk maybe about the economic benefits of these kinds of things in the long run.
Well, look, there's always the idea to alter behavior is advertising, regulation, and now taxes become a favorite. So we use tobacco taxes, we use alcohol taxes. Question is, do they work? Some work, some don't. I don't think the sugar tax has been proven yet. Look, I know Mexico has tried it. They put it on certain drinks. It was a 6% reduction from what I can see, not a 10.
It's now 12.
Is it 12?
Yeah.
Well, it depends. I hear 12, 6, 10. Whatever it is, there is some reduction in the sweet drinks, but we don't know if there was a reduction in overall sugar. But more importantly, did we have a reduction in obesity?
That's what was reported about 10 minutes ago when Alvis did an interview with Priceless. This is their research model that they've just completed, and obesity's come down by 12%. That should be good news, shouldn't it?
No, I don't. Well, okay, maybe my numbers are different. I heard that the drinking of those sweet drinks came down, but the determination of obesity, that's still up in the air. I mean, the question is what causes obesity? Yeah. Yes, sugar's a problem, but I don't have a lot of sugar, and I got a little bit more here in the middle than I would like. It's maybe too many breads, other type of foods. Just watching TV, what was going on in the UK, for example, they've found that a lot of the sweets have been dropping. People have naturally been dropping because of advertising. But obesity has grown because people are spending too much time with the computer and too much time with their phone. And so as people become more sedentary, they burn up less calories, and so once again. So I'm not sure if the sugar tax by itself, it would have to be a combination of measures that would have to take effect.
So you're a proponent then of a balanced approach to this whole thing, of which sugar tax would be one of the pillars, one would think, of incorporating this lifestyle in our society.
Yeah, I mean, I think sugar tax maybe if it's in proportion to everything else. The problem you have is when you have a tax, government says, here's a nice tax, let's get some revenue. So they throw the tax, nothing else changes, everything else continues on as before. So if you're going to be fair, you need to put tax on that, perhaps on breads, perhaps other things. Now, to be fair to the Department of Health, there's been rumors coming out of the Department of Health, but a lot of the department is waiting for a study for exactly this comprehensive approach. They're not looking for an isolated approach. At least that's my understanding.
No, let's call it the drinks industry surely will be affected quite heavily by this kind of thing. If you look at other sin taxes that have been implemented over time, how do you expect this to affect the wider industry?
It depends where the tax falls. So if you put the tax on certain drinks at the consumer level, what will happen is people go to the cheaper drinks. So you might have you raise the price, people go to the worst sodas. That's all they'll do. And they'll continue drinking as before. So all you're doing is bringing it from the high to the low. If you put it on the intermediate goods and you raise it across the board, well, maybe that'll have a slightly different effect. But really the problem is sugar. It can be in your cake. It can be everywhere. It can be I was having yogurt last night. That sounds healthy, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of sugar in that.
Yeah, lots of it.
I think the point is if you're going to go after sugar, you got to go across the board. You can't just target the drink industry.
So you're saying to us, we're heading down a road with sugar where we're going to have to ban advertising. We're going to have to regulate it a little bit like cigarettes.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I would ban. I mean, I don't know if it's as bad as cigarettes, right? So, but that becomes the point. Do you want to have a nanny state? Do you want to have a nanny state where we tell you what to do, how to operate? The problem is once we get into socialized medicine and we start having to pay for those diabetes, we start now becoming a nanny state. And that's
but isn't sugar the worst drug on the planet? If you look at the mortality rates, it kills more people than cigarettes.
Well, I wouldn't say sugar. I would say obesity. And obesity is caused by many things, as you know.
Of which sugar is a cornerstone of it.
Well, maybe it's a cornerstone, but maybe it's the bread and maybe the TV.
I think the sugar's been proven. We can't say maybe the sugar. I think the effects of sugar on especially young people has been proven. Even so, I went out of my way to do a little bit of research, and you know, some doctors believe that the reaction, your brain has the similar reaction to sugar that like it has to harder drugs like cocaine.
Well, look, I mean, people also say that your brain has a reaction to the internet. They say that actually when it comes to all the electronics, that people actually, the effect is so powerful that people have this mystic thing when they hear the phone, you have a twinge in your leg, you think the phone is going off. So that also changes your brain. So all I'm saying is sugar, maybe not the best, but what I'm finding is it's another witch hunt. That's what I'm saying.
Another witch hunt.
Another witch hunt of just another kind.
Witch hunt, you say.
Yeah.
We can't dismiss everything as a witch hunt. Surely we have to crunch the numbers and make sure what works for the people. You talk about a nanny state, but surely there has to be some regulation.
Well, there may be.
If left unregulated, we'd still be smoking 40 cigarettes a day.
Maybe, but I mean, the point is a lot of us still smoke too much. But the thing is the behavior has to change. People have to believe differently. So do the regulations contribute to that? Does the advertising contribute? Yes, I think it all starts to add up. But have we gotten better off? I mean, all we've done is we've shifted behavior. Like in the United States now, cigarettes are dropping and now marijuana is going up. Is marijuana any better?
Some people would say marijuana is a good thing.
Well, it make
it's one of the miracle cures doing the rounds now, curing all things from cancer to gut. Maybe that's a good thing. What I'm saying is all these things have to be tested.
They do all have to be tested, but all I'm saying is it's a balanced approach and there's no quick fix.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Keith Engel is the CEO of the South African Institute of Tax, and he says there's no magic bullet, no one thing. It has to be a variety of things for us to implement and bring the numbers down. But Elvis has more.
Now, the Democratic Alliance believes that increasing tax or sweetened beverages will have a knock-on effect on the poor. In a statement, the DA said that while it supports government's plans to reduce obesity by 10%, the proposed 20% sugar tax will further increase food prices, and it will hurt the poor who will not be able to afford alternative forms of sugar. Now, this comes after a report claiming that government will be campaigning for sugar and fat taxes as set out in the Department of Health Strategy for Prevention and Control of Obesity in South Africa. Joining us now from our studios in Cape Town is Dr. Wilmot James, the DA spokesperson on health. Doctor, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Yes, good morning to you too, and good morning to the listeners.
Is that correct about the DA against this particular tax? And why does the DA believe that the sugar tax will not be a solution to South Africa's weight problems?
Yes, we are, tax is a very blunt instrument, and we don't think it's a good idea because it will have regressive consequences. But let me say that what we need to do is understand better what influences what adolescents in particular put into their stomachs, what food they eat and what drinks they have. And it seems to us that there are four issues we need to look at. The first is to do with the influence of parents on diet. The second has to do with the availability of sugar sweetened beverages at school. It's a question of access and ease. The third is to do with the impact of a tax on price. And the fourth thing has to do with exercise. Mm-hmm. And we don't really understand what influences the choices adolescents make. In terms of the research that's been done in the US in particular and the UK, there's a very weak connection between a sugar tax and the body mass index of adolescents. We haven't had that research done here, but in the case of the US, there's a very weak relationship between those two things. What they also have looked at is the influence of advertising. Advertising has an effect. The third is that a tax does have an effect, but it's a weak effect, as I said. Mm-hmm. And the third has to do with the level of exercise that's available and to adolescents. Those are the three things we must look at, and tax is one part of it, but it's a very weak predictor of a reduction in obesity, especially among adolescents.
Now, you did mention there's going to be regressive consequences. What are some of those regressive consequences that you're talking about?
Well, the burden in terms of any price increase, either directly or the knock-on price increases in food as a result of taxing sugar more, will have to be borne by the poor. And therefore, the price of foods will increase for the people who can least afford it, and they don't have access to alternative, more healthier forms of sugar. that obviously must be part of one's diet in a much more moderate form. So that's what we mean by regressive, and therefore we must be very careful in terms of how we manipulate taxes. Now, if you, the model in the US introduced by Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro was very interesting. She proposed an excise tax, therefore a sin tax, and the proceeds of that tax must go to further research on diabetes and obesity. So if you're going to tax, it must be because you're serving two purposes. It influences choices that people make on the basis of cost, and it also would produce a revenue fund that exclusively is used for further research on obesity and diabetes. So I mean, the DA is open-minded on this question. If further research shows that there is some room for a clever way of taxing things, together with a range of other interventions, then we will certainly consider it. But presently we see the imposition of a sugar tax alone as a blunt instrument. We don't think it's going to work. We think on its own it's going to have a marginal effect. We, in any case, don't have any research done in South Africa on this front.
Now, in countries like Mexico, we heard early on in the program, which is considered to be one of the fattest nations in the world, they have introduced a sugar tax, and it worked. Mexico's sugar drinks in that country are down by 12%, the intake of people there. So don't you think that South Africa could achieve that in a similar fashion?
I mean, it's entirely possible. I think it's I think a modest effect. Coca-Cola being down by 6%. You know, you're talking here about sugar-sweetened beverages. What about fruit juices? Fruit juices are full of sugar as well. They're natural forms of sugar. So I think simply looking at the Mexican example, where you cite the decline in Coca-Cola consumption, and there was an increase in Mexico of consumption of milk and water, which is very good. It does show an effect. It's a weak effect, and it's weak on its own. So we don't think that's a good model. We think that we need to do something special in our environment. I was going to point out that the research we've done in South Africa is simply a mathematical modeling that makes a whole range of behavioral assumptions. And I think a mathematical modeling is just a start of the process of research. So we really need to do much more careful research and look at all the factors that influences the choices adolescents and adults make in terms of consumption of beverages and food.
Early on, we also heard that a balanced approach is maybe needed, but instead of imposing then a sugar tax in South Africa, what do you as the Democratic Alliance suggest?
Well, what we suggest is that, that there ought to be an advisory council appointed to do with healthy lifestyles. It's about healthy lifestyles. And we're proposing that government appoints an advisory council on healthy lifestyles. And this council, consisting of all the specialists in this area, nutritionists, scientists, and other specialists in this area, gives advice to the Minister of Health in terms of promoting healthy lifestyle, gives advice to the Minister of Sport in terms of exercise, gives advice to the Minister of Cooperative Development so that municipalities would create outside gyms so that people have exercise opportunities, especially in working class and poor neighborhoods. We need to have a balanced approach in terms of the food we consume, and we have to work with the right people in order to get that done, and it can be voluntary. In the US, the Beverage Association agreed to withdraw sugar-sweetened drinks from schools. We need to do the same thing here. It's so easy to just, there's a vending machine at every school selling Coke. That shouldn't happen. We can't force people, but I do believe in terms of what happens at schools that there ought to be a withdrawal of sugar-sweetened, soda pop that's so easily available. So we do that, focus on schools, focus on exercise, and create an advisory council to advise ministers in terms of what to do. And I think an advisory council with the right group of experts can give good advice to ministers in terms of what programs they ought to follow in terms of diet. By that I mean nutrition, advice about the best nutrition, advice about how to get exercise going in an organized way that matters, and to withdraw the availability of sugar-sweetened drinks from school premises.
Thank you.
And that should be done on a voluntary basis.
Dr. James, thank you so much for your time.
A great pleasure.
That was Dr. Wilmot James. He's from the Democratic Alliance, spokesperson on health. Now, you heard it all, and we want to know from you about what you think about all the sugar tax and obesity in South Africa. It's increasing. We, as you know, that we're asking you that question. Do you think that sugar tax is then the answer to South Africa's obesity problems? I would like to know from you on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on the Facebook page. Yevon.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jarvis. Let's just take a quick look at some of the tweets that are coming in. These are live tweets based on our question of the day today. Now, Lynn talks about SABC Newsroom, not the answer to obesity. All the government is doing is making more money because sugar is used for practically everything. We need to find a way for our people to eat less sugar. Homotso Mokapi says, at SABC Newsroom, even though sugar is not a solitary cause of obesity, processed refined sugar has a terrible effect on the body. Yes, it does. There is no doubt about that. And Lynn again, what about fruit? There's plenty of sugar in fruit. Yes, we just spoke about fruit as well, Lynn. Keep the questions coming at SABC Newsroom. Do we have more questions? Do we have more of these? Not for now. Let's move on to our Facebook page. This is what you can see there today. Now, government's plans to boost investor confidence and stimulate economic growth will come under discussion at the Cabinet Lekgotla, which gets underway in Pretoria in a short while. The new structures within the South African Police Service are in line with a new back-to-basics approach, and in an op-ed of one of the U.S. biggest dailies, United Nations Secretary Ban Ki-moon has warned Israelis and Palestinians to read the writing on the wall. Those are some of your stories on our Newsroom Facebook page, or you can go to our website. Just go to sabc.co.za/news, or type Newsroom in the Facebook search bar. Will pop up like our page. This is our question of the day. The tweets are coming in. We'd like to hear more about what you think. Is sugar tax an answer to South Africa's obesity problem? That's what we want to know from you. After the break, we'll speak to the Heart and Stroke Foundation here in South Africa, so don't go away.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top-quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
As stories are broken around the world, SABC makes sure you do not miss out. As the stories unfold throughout the day, News at 8 updates all newsworthy stories worldwide. Globally, we are there. Locally, we leave no story untold. Make a date with News at 8 every Saturday and Sunday on SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Welcome back. This is Newsroom. Now, you've probably heard this a million times before, but it's worth repeating. Added sugars like sucrose and high fructose corn syrup contain a whole bunch of calories with zero essential nutrients. For this reason, they're called empty calories. There are no proteins, essential fats, vitamins, or minerals in sugar, just pure energy. When people eat up to 10 to 20% of calories as sugar, this can become a major problem and contribute to nutrient deficiencies. Now, registered dietitian at the Heart and Stroke Foundation of South Africa, Jessica Byrne, well, she's just stepped into our Cape Town studio to talk to us about the effect of sugar on our bodies. Good morning to you, Jessica. Just tell us quickly before we get into the tax and all that stuff, how does sugar how does it affect our bodies? Is it like a drug?
I wouldn't say it's exactly like a drug, but the problem is when we have too much sugars in our diets, because as you mentioned before, they're very high in energy or in kilojoules, and if we consume too much of that, it can actually lead to weight gain over time. And the danger with that is that it puts us at risk for conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease and strokes. And I think what is particularly concerning is that in South Africa we really have a massive burden of obesity in our country that's affecting women, men and our children too. And sugar definitely does play a role in that high burden of obesity.
Now, sugar tax is the buzzword that's appearing on the horizon. There's some international benchmarks that tells us that if we implement some form of sugar tax, obesity levels might come down. How do you view this?
So yes, it is one of the strategies that has been recommended by the World Health Organization to help to really curb this obesity epidemic. And the idea is that with increasing the price of sugar sweetened beverages, for example, obviously that will become more expensive and will then ultimately be less appealing to the consumer. So they hopefully will be consuming less of these sugar-sweetened beverages. And I think it definitely does have a role to play. We have seen in other countries that have already started implementing this, for example, in Europe and in Mexico, that they have already seen some reductions in the consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages. But I think it's also important to remember that it's not the only solution, and we need to be looking at other ways to educate the public on firstly what are they consuming. So looking at food labels, looking at the regulation of marketing of these sugary foods and drinks, and then also looking at other aspects of the lifestyle and looking at education programs, awareness programs to help increase physical activity and promote other aspects of a healthy diet.
So sugar has been pointed as the demon in the overall picture. How much sugar is healthy to have in our diets, and how are we doing then here in South Africa, Jessica?
So the World Health Organization recommends that we should be having no more than about 10% of our total energy intake should be coming from sugary foods and drinks. And so that equates to about 12 teaspoons of sugar a day. And just remember that that's sugar that you're adding to tea and coffee and cereals, as well as the sugar that's already added to a lot of food. So, for example, in your sugar-sweetened beverages, in cereals, desserts, baked products, etc. And just to put that into perspective, a 330 ml can of a fizzy cool drink, for example, actually contains about 8 teaspoons of sugar just in that one can alone. So that already, is adding almost all of the sugar that you should be having in a day. And in terms of South Africa and looking at our intake, there's various studies that show that we're eating between 50 to 100 grams of sugars a day, so far above that 12 teaspoons of sugar recommendation.
That is very scary, Jessica, but we have to leave it there, unfortunately. Thank you to Jessica Byrne from our Cape Town studios. She is a registered dietitian with the Heart and Stroke Foundation here in South Africa. She says 12 teaspoons a day, that's the maximum. Now look at that. A mango has almost 3.5 teaspoons of sugar in it. I had a mango last night thinking that I'm living healthy. My word. You see? And this is where the confusion comes in. We don't know what we should be eating. And I've been doing this diet thing for the last 35 years. And I still don't know what I should be eating. Tim Noakes tells me one thing. The industry tells me something different. Now, even the mango that I had last night was bad for me, Phil. I'm confused. I'm confused, and we all need direction on what we should be eating, what is good for you. Some say, eat the meat from nose to tail. Eat that. Others say, no, don't eat any fat, and so forth. So I'm confused, and trust me, I've spent a lifetime a lifetime on diet, it feels like. What is healthy? Now I don't know what's healthy anymore. Phil Hawkins is here. Maybe Phil can give us an idea as to what he thinks is healthy, because Phil's quite a fit young man.
Yeah, very good morning. Well, let's get straight into the weather. If we take a look, first of all, at today's weather forecast, we're going to start off by looking at the cloud cover. And if you have been watching the weather over the last few weeks, this really is no surprise to you whatsoever. A lot of cloud cover all the way throughout Central Africa. We do have some cloud cover coming in towards the northwestern parts of Africa as well, from the western coastline. Low pressure systems there, bringing that in for today and most likely for tomorrow as well. You can see that pressure system just sitting northwest of the continent there. We're also seeing a lot of rainfall being brought in through the central regions. No surprises there, as we said, but take a look at the intensification of the storm systems off the eastern coastline and, of course, a small ways into the eastern interior of southern Africa as northern regions, as well as Central Africa's southern regions. Now, we are also expecting rainfall through South Africa for today, mostly just isolated showers, but we are expecting slightly more intense rainfall over the southern coastlines of South Africa. In fact, we are expecting 40-kilometre-per-hour winds all the way throughout that southeastern coastline as well. But let's take a look in terms of your temperatures at what's happening today. Port Elizabeth peaks at 28 degrees, Cape Town 27, and Uppington 39 degrees. Now, it is a much more pleasant day in the southwestern parts of South Africa for today. Calvinia peaking nice and pleasant there around the higher 20s, whereas yesterday it was approaching the 40-degree mark. So definitely a much more pleasant outlook in South Africa for today, at least for the western areas. Towards the eastern parts of Central Africa, we're expecting a warm day as well. Kigali's at 27 degrees, a fair amount of cloud cover in that area at the moment. Not raining yet, but we are expecting that rainfall to make its way towards the area very, very shortly. Lilongwe at 26, expecting a lot of that rainfall concentrated in this area. Now, this is where we're going to leave it for now. Be back shortly. Stay tuned.
It's 10:00 hours Central Africa time on this Tuesday, the 2nd of the 2nd, 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News, Channel 404. If you've just joined us, Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the second hour. I'm Elvis Preston, and we will be with you until 1200 hours. Stay with us as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. We're also streaming live on YouTube with the entire show available on our YouTube channel. On our question of the day, today we're asking you, is sugar tax an answer to South Africa's obesity problems? You've heard all the arguments. I want to know from you, what do you think? Let us know on our Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom and on our Facebook page. But first, let's take a look at all your news headlines. The World Health Organization has declared the Zika virus a global health emergency. More than 200 people are without shelter after several informal structures in Mandela Park at Hout Bay in the Cape Peninsula were destroyed by fire. And protesting workers at the Tshwane University of Technology say they will continue with their action until the institution's management meets with them, as other tertiary institutions are busy with orientation week. Now that's all coming up in a short while to give you all the headlines and of course your top stories. But first, before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Elvis. It's a very interesting morning already. It's only Tuesday, the 2nd of February, but a lot is happening in the world of sports, and not all of it bad, you know, crises and corruption and fraud and all of that, but good, very good stuff happening in the world of sports. And this is what's coming up later on. Wheelchair tennis star Lucas Sitola arrives back from the Australian Open to a hero's welcome after winning the quad doubles title. This is Manchester City sealed the deal of the transfer window as they announced that Pep Guardiola will be taking over from Pellegrini in July. And Brazil, the host of the Rio 2016 Olympic Games later this year, said that the Zika poses a minimal threat to Olympic athletes and visitors. And that's what you can expect in the sport. We'll also be chatting to Vatangobeni about all the problems that are happening at the EP Kings later on in this bulletin. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. Let's now take a look at your top story. The World Health Organization says a disease linked to the Zika virus in Latin America poses a global public health emergency, requiring a united response. Experts are worried that the virus is spreading far and fast, with devastating consequences. The infection has been linked to cases of microphyly, and in which babies are born with underdeveloped brains. The WHO alert puts Zika in the same category of concern as the Ebola virus. Research and aid will be fast-tracked to tackle the infection.
Declaring that the recent cluster of microcephaly and other neurological abnormalities reported in Latin America, following a similar cluster of French Polynesia in 2014, constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. As a precautionary measure, and because of the association, a coordinated international response is needed to improve surveillance, the detection of infections, congenital malformations, the detection of neurological complications, to intensify the control of mosquito populations, and to expedite the development of diagnostic tests and vaccines to protect people at risk.
More than 200 people are without shelter after several informal structures in Mandela Park at Hout Bay in the Cape Peninsula were destroyed by fire. No injuries have been reported and the cause of the blaze is not yet known. 5 fire trucks and 23 firefighters responded to the flames. More than 60 wood and iron structures were gutted. The city's Human Settlements Department says it's providing fire kits for residents to rebuild their shacks. The South African Red Cross Society is also expected to provide hot meals and blankets for the people for those in need in that area. About 47 people have been injured after a bus overturned on the N8 between Bloemfontein and Botshabelo in the Free State. 9 of the occupants sustained serious injuries. The interstate bus driver lost control while en route to Bloemfontein. Some passengers say the bus was travelling at high speed when the accident happened.
47 patients, which we've already transported. The most serious one, the priority 2 patients, there was 9 patients that's already been stabilised and been transported to the local hospitals, those hospitals, provincial hospitals. And then also the rest of the patients are priority 3, not very injured. Luckily, there's nobody been trapped or passed away on scene, but that's what we've got so far. On this stage, it's a very sensitive place where the accident happened, so we're busy with the incident command structure.
Protesting workers at the Tshwane University of Technology say they will continue with their action until the institution's management meets with them. Yesterday, police had to fire stun grenades as the workers blocked students' access to the campus. Higher Education Minister Bladen Nzimande has blamed political opportunists for hijacking student and worker protest at the university.
Steadfast in their demand for more money and permanent jobs. They barred students from accessing the campus, and when police tried to assist them, chaos. More scuffles between police and the EFF Student Command.
No, but I'm respecting you.
No one is going to work here, and those who defy us, we will deal with them.
Some students baffled and destitute.
Workers have vowed to shut down all campuses if their demands are not met. But the start of the academic year plunged into disarray.
Register. It's a mess inside. People are not even working. We've been coming here since 4 a.m.
Last week, these workers rejected a 5,000 rand wage increase and outsourcing over 3 years.
It is our position as management and organized labor and the students that we have reflected quite critically on the plight of our workers, and this is the best that we can do for our workers.
Higher Education blames a third force for the class disruptions.
We think what's happening at the TUT is some political parties who are launching their local government elections campaign.
Nzimande urged workers to return to work. Crisalda Lewis, SABC News, in Pretoria.
Many tertiary institutions are meanwhile busy with Orientation Week. At the Vaal University of Technology, lectures were postponed yesterday. They are expected to resume tomorrow due to a backlog in registration. Meanwhile, first-year students are grappling with the issues of fees.
Their first exposure to campus life, but the fees issue still prominent. 17-year-old Ozail Marufu is the so-called Mason Middle student. Both her parents are teachers. They are too rich for NSFAS funding, but too poor for her tuition fees.
This year, for the whole course, it's 58,085 rand. Yes, and that includes, I don't think that includes books. I still need to pay for my textbooks separately as well.
However, with the hashtag Access campaign aimed at raising 10 million rand by the end of this month, a sense of relief for many like Ozail.
I really appreciate it, and I'd like to call out to all stakeholders out there and everybody just who has the money in their pockets to come out and give out.
And the campaign seems to be bearing fruit a day after its launch.
Since Nedbank donated 2 million yesterday at the Orientation Week Welcome Day, it opened up the floodgates for more corporates to actually start, donating. So, throughout the day, we've been having our phones ringing from corporates actually wanting to donate.
At Vaal University of Technology, fundraising efforts are also being established to help almost 1,000 needy students.
An amount which we have saved, it's 1.8 million
to assist our students. We have started with the process of pledging for the students.
The university has set aside 14 million this year to assist those missing middle to make sure that they also have access to education.
Lectures at VUT are set to begin on Wednesday. Marigate Amatabe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Meanwhile, lawyers for 43 Cape Peninsula University of Technology students are expected to bring an urgent application in the Western Cape High Court this morning, seeking an amendment to their bail conditions. The students are out on bail, 3,000 rand each. They face charges of public violence and malicious damage to property relating to the fee protest in November last year. Their bail conditions prevent them from entering the campus.
Alleged involvement in the Fees Must Fall campaign is now threatening their academic careers. Despite being granted bail last year, they are yet to see the inside of a lecture hall, and they are under strict bail conditions. Now, the legal counsel is turning to the court to intervene and have the conditions amended.
The circumstances have changed. It's 2016 now. There has not been any Fees Must Fall protest. There has not been any vandalism to any property. And so now it only makes sense that the bail conditions must be amended because those students have to go back on campus.
Students fear their academic careers are in limbo. The university says it is monitoring the court case and will only comment once it has been concluded. Carmel Lochmerg-Roberts, SABC News, Cape Town.
3 members of the African National Congress's NEC will be deployed to stabilize the party in the Western Cape. This after the provincial chairperson Marius Fransman and the secretary Faiz Jacobs were asked to step down. Fransman faces sexual harassment charges while Jacobs is accused of assaulting a party researcher. Members of the ANC's top 6 met in Cape Town yesterday to discuss the matter.
The Western Cape has found itself in a tough spot lately. Both its provincial chairperson and secretary have criminal investigations against them. Western Cape Party Chair Marius Fransman is embroiled in a scandal following charges of sexual harassment. And Provincial Secretary Faiz Jacobs stands accused of physically assaulting a staff member.
The provincial chairperson has been asked to step aside for the duration of the investigation of the allegation labelled against him. That the provincial secretary has been asked to step aside for the duration of the dismissal process against him. That is in the interest of protecting both of them and the ANC.
Jacobs has requested that his matter be dealt with by the National Disciplinary Committee. ANC Secretary-General Gwede Mantashe says the region's branches are healthy, but the Provincial Executive Committee needs support.
Regions in the Western Cape, all of them are in good shape. All the regions are operational, they are functional, and that is where the basis of the organization is. That's where branches are. There's no branch that is in the provincial office. Branches are in the regions. All those regions are operational and they are stable. And to us, that gives us a basis to believe that the Western Cape is in good shape. Incidents doesn't take it out of alignment.
One caretaker will attend to the chairperson's office, another will assist the office of the secretary. A third will oversee administrative matters. Abra Barbia, SABC News, Cape Town.
The family of slain Mozambican street vendor Emmanuel Sitole say they will forget his killers, but they will not forgive them. Yesterday, the Johannesburg Magistrates Court sentenced 2 men accused of Sitole's murder to lengthy jail terms.
This murder was as senseless as it was brutal. It was totally unnecessary that a person should have lost his life in such an undignified manner.
Caught on camera, sending shockwaves across the country. Emmanuel lost his life over a box of cigarettes. And 9 months on, justice has been meted out. The man responsible for the fatal blow, Mtindo Pengu, handed 17 years behind bars and a lesser sentence for his co-accused. Sfundo Mzimela, who who threatened Sithole with a monkey-range spanner, gets 10 years for aiding in the attack.
Number one, who already has a previous conviction for a crime of violence, is a danger to society and should be removed from society for a very long time. Accused number four's actions did not actually kill the deceased. Clearly, he should be treated more leniently.
The third accused, a minor, managed to escape jail time. He was released on a warning in November after his assault and theft conviction. Sithole family members are not all willing to forgive.
I'm not happy with the sentence. They should have received a harsher one.
I'm at ease with the sentence, even though I know that he won't come back.
Emmanuel's violent death will remain etched in their minds. Closed on a brutal and shameful incident, but the minor is not quite off the hook. He'll be subjected to regular drug and alcohol tests in the next few years and will be closely watched for any criminal behavior. That will determine whether he has to serve time behind bars. He'll return to this court in 5 years' time. Anqaba Mchunu, SABC News, Johannesburg.
The United Nations Secretary-General has welcomed a decision by the African Union Head of State Summit to dispatch a high-level delegation to Burundi. The team will engage the Burundian government on accepting a peacekeeping mission in that country.
The AU decision on Burundi appears to have the full backing of the UN Secretary-General, despite the continent's decision to pull back from its earlier approval of the African peacekeeping mission.
He welcomes the decisions of the AU leaders to dispatch a high-level delegation to Burundi for further consultations with President Nkurunziza and Burundian authorities, and stresses that measures must be found to address the ongoing violence in the country.
Pressed on this about turn,
the African Union has a leadership role to play in this. They've obviously reassessed the situation somewhat. We're still very much supportive of their efforts.
We also asked about outgoing AU Chair President Robert Mugabe's public admonishment of the Secretary-General on the question of Security Council reform.
I don't know if you saw the interaction with President Mugabe sort of targeting, singling out the Secretary-General about equality at the UN reform. How did the Secretary-General feel about the circumstance that played itself out in?
The Secretary-General is not unused to being criticized and singled out. It comes with the territory.
Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
Staying in the U.S., the nationwide process of selecting candidates to run in November's U.S. presidential race has almost concluded in the state of Iowa. Voters gathered across the region in schools, churches and other venues to voice their opinion of the candidates. U.S. Senator Ted Cruz beat billionaire Donald Trump in Iowa's Republican presidential nominating contest. Cruz, a conservative lawmaker from Texas, won with 28% of the vote. That's compared to 24% for the businessman Donald Trump, which was surprising. Marco Rubio, a U.S. senator from Florida, came in third with 23%. On the Democratic side, the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is in a virtual tie with her rival Bernie Sanders, a self-described Democratic Socialist U.S. senator from Vermont. The vote count stands at roughly 50% to each candidate, with 95% of the state's precincts reporting results. Sanders has already declared a tie for the Democratic race.
Announced their winner several hours ago, but there is this dead heat. They're calling it a virtual tie, really just a percentage points between the two of them. There are some precincts still to declare, so we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there. But for Hillary Clinton, it means that obviously she didn't get the big win she was hoping for. And if you look ahead to the next vote, which will be in New Hampshire, now Bernie Sanders is expected to win that quite easily because he is the senator of the neighbouring state of Vermont. That would mean that he would have won or come very close to the first two primaries and caucuses, which would be something of a setback for Hillary Clinton. She's hoping not to repeat what happened in 2008, where she didn't come first in Iowa. She came third to Barack Obama, and of course Barack Obama then went on to get the nomination and eventually the presidency. So a setback for Hillary Clinton, but this dead heat at the moment still means that both candidates have a good shot of getting this Democrat nomination.
Well, that's your news for now. We'll take a break and we'll be right back after that with your regional news.
As stories are broken around the world, SABC makes sure you do not miss out. As the stories unfold throughout the day, News at 8 updates all newsworthy stories worldwide. Globally, we are there. Locally, we leave no story untold. Make a date with News at 8 every Saturday and Sunday on SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Your World makes it its business every evening to round up the leading local stories and international news to keep you informed all the time.
Make a date with Your World every evening for all the news headlines around the world to keep you abreast with knowledge.
Catch Your World for headlines across the world every Monday to Friday from 9 p.m, then Saturday and Sunday from 7 p.m.
Welcome back. My name is Kendall Mahamati and I've got your sports on Newsroom. Our top story in this hour is about how the Minister of Sport and Recreation in South Africa, Fikile Mbalula, was at the OR Tambo International Airport to welcome Lucas Sithole, who returned from a successful Australian Open campaign. Lucas Sithole won the wheelchair tennis quad doubles title in Melbourne.
Tennis star Lucas Sithole may not have won the quad singles title at the Australian Open, but the 29-year-old still made the nation proud. The defending South African champion became the first African to win both the quad single and double Grand Slam titles in their careers. Sithole, who has his sight on a medal at the 2016 Rio Paralympic Games, says the Grand Slam title was a moral boost ahead of the global showpiece in Brazil.
All in all, I'm very happy the way I played there. It shows that I'm on a right path since preparing for Rio 2016. That's my goal since this year started. My coach is my witness. He knows.
With the financial backing from the airport company South Africa, our tennis players did the country proud in the quad division in Australia. Minister of Sports Fikile Mbalula maintains it will go a long way in putting the disabled athletes on the map.
Kothatso and Lucas and Oscar Pistorius, leave alone what he did later on. They changed the face in the world of people to believe in the sport of people with disability.
Joseph Mohali, SABC News.
A bit of cheer for South Africans from the Australian Open there. Now, in what some call the coup of the transfer window, the most sought-after football coach in the world, Spaniard Pep Guardiola, has signed a 3-year contract to take over as Manchester City manager in July. Manuel Pellegrini will leave the job on the 30th of June to make way for Guardiola, who joins after 3 seasons at Bayern Munich in Germany.
Pellegrini's contract ran until 2017, but he announced today that he will step down at the end of the season. The 45-year-old Guardiola will replace Pellegrini, who will leave on June the 30th. A statement from City said the 62-year-old Pellegrini was fully supportive of the announcement being made. At the time he was in charge, Pellegrini led City to a domestic title in the same year. Pellegrini replaced Roberto Mancini in 2013 and took them to a Premier League and League Cup double the following season. He has won 64 of his 99 league games as a manager, a record that is only eclipsed by Jose Mourinho, who won 73 of his opening 99 league games as Chelsea manager.
Before we finish, I'll tell you that I talked with the club and I finished my contract in the original date, in June. We extend the contract 1 year more, but with a clause that one of the club or me can not use that extent of contract. So I finish here in the original date, the 30th of June. not speculation about things. They are not doing nothing behind me. I know this 1 month ago, but I don't think it's good to this rumor and speculation about different things. I prefer to finish today. That's why I told the press, I told the players, and I spoke with the club 2 weeks ago that I will do it.
Guardiola has signed a 3-year contract to take over as manager in July, according to a statement released by City. Guardiola, who won 14 titles with Barcelona in his 4-year coaching spell, had turned down a contract extension at Bayern late last year after winning back-to-back league titles and being on course for a 3rd straight Bundesliga crown.
Now, the long-awaited annual general meeting of the Eastern Cape Rugby Union has been postponed to the 28th of next month. Scuffles erupted when disgruntled club members forced their way into the venue. This is last week on Friday when the meeting was adjourned while the executive of EPRU and SARU officials led by CEO Ururu tried to intervene. The meeting continued later, but only one agenda point was dealt with.
Internal squabbles at the EPRU are far from over. These club officials forced their way into the meeting, demanding a report on finances. The union is facing a liquidation application by Players Union SARPA.
Our elders are selling us out. You will not see them at practice sessions. You will not see them when players need transport to go home from practice. You will not see them when players need assistance, financial assistance, when they need jobs. You will not see them. You will not see them when we have to pay our own money from our own pockets to go to the games. But you will only see them when it comes to defending Chicky Watson.
After the scuffles, the EPRU executive tried to prevent the financial statement, but club officials dismissed it, claiming discrepancies.
What the delegates also wanted is to know the financial status of the commercial entity, the company. That ends on the 31st of December. That has been in process so that we know. We know that the commercial and non-commercial entity are supposed to operate as one. So yes, there's also, from my view, there's also financial challenges that we need to encounter there and deal with it in order to take the union forward.
EPRU will consult its auditors to improve the financial report. Zolani Moya, SABC News, Port Elizabeth.
And so clearly there are major financial issues out at the Eastern Province Rugby Union. And to join us to talk a little bit about what's going on and what's next is Vatan Kumbeni, rugby journalist who's well known across the board. Good morning, welcome to Newsroom.
Good morning to you, Kendall, and to viewers as well.
This is quite an interesting situation that we find ourselves down Eastern Cape side.
I think it's more than just interesting. It's desperate and very, very disappointing. The repercussions of this are severe, not only, I think, to the Eastern Cape, but to South African rugby as well in general. When the Kings started initially, the Southern Kings, Spears then, was that it was going to be a vehicle for black players, rugby players, to get into Super Rugby and eventually into the Springbok team. However, over the years, we've seen how, political squabbling, the misappropriation of money, funds, into this union and into the franchise eventually have seen this franchise go backwards. We've seen them come into Super Rugby, we've seen them come out of Super Rugby, we've seen them lose a lot of players, especially in the build-up to this year's Super Rugby season. And that primarily comes down to mismanagement of funds, and it's come down to a lot of political squabbling. And the sooner they get this over and done with, the more the better it is for rugby to progress.
Seems like all the problems are being laid squarely at Cheeky Watson's door.
Well, who else do you lay the problems at? Whose door do you lay them at? It's got to be the head. The fish starts rotting at the head. You've got to go straight to the president of the franchise.
It's been 4 months since some of the players were paid. That's a really long time. In fact, the Rugby Players Union is trying to liquidate the union itself.
No doubt. I mean, what else? What other recourse do they have? This issue of non-payment of players and management and coaches and so on happened throughout the better part of last year, and we saw a lot of players leave. The likes of Tim Whitehead, who was their captain. We saw the likes of Lisa Kopoka, who's left and gone to the Bulls. So I think the players have now they've got no other option but to try and liquidate the union itself in order to get some of their monies back. However, the problem goes deeper than that. It goes down to, it filters down to the clubs as well. We've seen the Super Rugby franchise being taken over by SARU. So I think SARU now needs to step in and bring in an administrator there, because if they don't, there's going to be a big problem.
So SARU needs to step in, bring in an administrator, but they can't go in unless they get invited by the union, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. What's going to happen now, they're going to have a special general council general meeting
28th of February.
28th of Feb, yeah. Where, again, they're not going to adopt the minutes. The clubs are not going to adopt the minutes. And then they're going to vote for no confidence on Chiki Watson. And then from there, they'll request SARU to bring in an administrator like they've done at Border Rugby Union as well. So hopefully that will allow for at least some sort of order to come into running of the union itself, and the clubs will need to sort themselves out thereafter, because SARU cannot run a union. The union has got to be run primarily by the clubs itself and by the affiliates of APRU.
But the Super Rugby season starts in a couple of weeks' time. Right now, the Southern Kings franchise we know has been taken over by SARU, but surely this must affect their preparations in some way or another.
Without a doubt, they lost a coach. And then Tion Davis had to come step in. Mzwande Stick came in as backline coach. However, that's not enough. We've seen SARU bringing the MOB unit under Rassie Erasmus. But then that's not going to be enough. You need more than just a month, to set up a team for a Super Rugby campaign. And unfortunately, they've lost the players, and there's been a lot of disruptions within the backroom staff as well. So I don't see them doing very, very well in the upcoming Super Rugby season. Hopefully, again, we keep on saying hopefully, the heart that the players have shown and commitment to the cause, shown by some members of management as well. Hopefully that will carry them through. We won't see the record scores that we've seen previously in Super Rugby season when African teams have campaigned before. So hopefully when things get back to order, the Super Rugby franchise will ultimately and eventually achieve its goals.
Vata, thank you so much for making the time to see us. We know that you were stuck in a bit of Joburg traffic before coming through. Really appreciate your time, and we do hope that we do get to see the back of this particular crisis happening at the EP Kings. All right, now that's Vata Ngobeni, a rugby journalist, trying to get us to understand exactly what's going on with the EP Kings and their financial situation. We're taking a short break. When we come back, Kevin Janssen joins us.
Born with malformation of the limbs, David lives his life to the fullest.
I got this. Let me try my own. Got on the bed, then start playing soccer in the streets, then do this.
He can play soccer, he reads and writes, he is even able to swim, a role model to his peers.
Look at the scripture. It doesn't say I'm a conqueror, it says I'm more than a conqueror.
Join your host, Buleng Mulebati, on Bupilong every Friday at 17:30.
Welcome back with Newsroom here on SABC News. Now, Meetings Africa is the premier business events trade show, and it's hosted annually by the South Africa National Convention Bureau and South African Tourism. As this year attracted the best minds in the global business events industry. The 11th edition of Meetings Africa is set to take place at the Sandton Convention Centre from the 22nd until the 24th of this month, with the focus, Think African. Tourism Minister Derek Hanekom is expected to officially open the show. The event is set to pave the way for investment and growth in business and tourism on the continent. I'm joined in studio this morning by, Chief Convention Bureau Officer at South Africa Tourism, Amanda Kotse-Nhlapo. Very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thinking African. It's an interesting concept. Tell us a little bit about the mindset behind Thinking African this year.
I think, the theme for the past few years were advancing Africa together, and that's really what we want to do and have to do, I have to say. In the business events industry, it's extremely important that we talk about co-opetition instead of competition.
Yeah.
And, as African nations, we really need to work together because these meetings rotate around the continent and around the world, of course. And so the Think African is really to showcase that we can collaborate and actually put Africa on the map. Because we are the fastest growing and interesting, also the most sought after business events destination at the moment, as a continent.
Also the most beautiful country in the world, if you read the reports that they're saying. But Meetings Africa, tell us a little bit about Meetings Africa. The track record's been quite successful in recent times. And what do you think Meetings Africa does for the country?
And I'll use some statistics. Last year, in the 10th year edition, we celebrated 10 years. And for a trade show on the continent, in Africa, it is quite astounding that we can actually have 11 edition. Last year, we had 66% of all our hosted buyers never been to Africa or South Africa. And the potential for them, economic impact, was around 1 billion. Now, do I have to say more than that? I think what Meetings Africa is really creating a platform, not just to do business, but also to help us to, with the knowledge economy, to grow our knowledge economy. And the result, of course, will be then transforming Africa.
The South African National Convention Bureau, your role, what do you think you guys stand to achieve this year?
I think the most important thing is that we create that platform for our businesses, to showcase to the world that Africa can do it, South Africa can do it, we can host the best. People forget that we hosted a wonderful World Cup in 2010. And we keep on, with these kind of platforms to just affirm our ability to host and to do very successful meetings, for all these associations and corporates.
South Africa is the leader in business events, hosting industry here on the African continent, which really says that we're open for business. Is Africa responding?
Yeah, I definitely think so. We are number one in Africa and the Middle East, and I have to say that Middle East part because we are ranked number 32 in the world as a meetings destination. And yes, one of the things that we are very excited about is this year we will open an office, a headquarters, for the Africa Society of Association Executives. And we hope to have like 50 African associations in all kind of spheres, from medical associations to professional engineering associations, science associations. And they are all coming together here at Meetings Africa to really tell the world that our academic strength, the knowledge economy, when you bring the minds of the world to a place, the legacy that is left behind is really growth and economic development.
Yeah, that's incredible. Now, the numbers, what are the numbers saying? Are you happy with the number of new business tourism arrivals, if we can say that? From now to 2020, we already secured 176 bids or association meetings, whether it's international or regional. And that will result in more or less 150,000 delegates. But I think more important, direct economic impact of 3.1 billion rand. That's staggering. Now, you are bringing the youth in this year into Meetings Africa. Why do you see that as imperative in getting them involved in Meetings Africa going forward? Is that the next decade of Meetings Africa? It's the third year that we will do the IMEX MPI MCI Future Leaders Forum. It's a forum that is actually linked to one of, I would say, the best international business event show happening every year in Frankfurt, and where we are partners with them. And they saw the opportunity and also to help us. I think if we are not making sure that we have a youth that can take over, events industry, a business events industry, it will be very difficult, to continue to grow in this fashion. I think one of the important things is that, last year in 2014, the winner of the Africa edition of this Future Leaders Forum actually went and won the international, the global prize, So it says that we have strong youth, our universities is doing something right, and it's really to add to the tourism part of the university studies, where there's an opportunity to look at business events other than just
hospitality.
Yeah, hospitality or direct tourism. But before we close, going green is part of your as part of your mantra, if we can call it that. What kind of innovations are you having in that space?
I think one of the most important things is that I must say, I think we're the only trade show that only have green stand awards. We do not have stand awards for the most beautiful stand and the biggest and, all that. For us, it's about the greening. And there's all kind of stuff that we do. Renewable energy, that people are. We also plant trees every year so people can buy, even our buyers that come from around the world. We will have something in the amount of 500 buyers, and all of them can actually buy a tree to offset. This 2014, I think it was 33 trees that we planted. And of course recycling. Recycling, a big thing. I have to say that for 3 consecutive years now, Meetings Africa actually won the best green event in Southern Africa.
Fantastic, and we look forward to the event. It's happening starting on the 22nd of February this month until the 24th here at the Convention Centre in Sandton in Johannesburg. Amanda Kotze-Nhlapo is the Chief Convention Bureau Officer at South African Tourism. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Well, let's take a quick look now at what is on our Newsroom Facebook page at this hour. Now, this story is moving on. Brazil's top health official said earlier that the Zika virus outbreak is proving to be much worse than believed because most cases show no symptoms. But improved testing should allow the country to get a better grip on this burgeoning public health crisis. Of course, earlier the WHO called it a global emergency. Now, the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has welcomed a decision by the African Union Heads of State Summit to dispatch a high-level delegation to Burundi to engage the government about accepting a peacekeeping mission to the country. Finally, long queues are visible at taxi ranks in Umlazi Township, south of Durban, as the strike by municipal bus drivers enters its second day. There you see the buses on that picture, absolutely blocking all the roads in the southern parts of Durban. Yes, scary indeed. Anyhow, that's on our Facebook page, or you can go to our website, sabc.co.za/news. But time now for, well, a pep talk on policy uncertainty with Professor Raymond Parsons and Elvis Presley.
Well, that's right, Eben. In studio here with us is Professor Raymond Parsons. Now, he will tell us a little bit more about the new Policy Uncertainty Index. Now, for the past few years, overseas studies of policy uncertainty and its impact on economic performance have led to the development of indices in several countries that broadly seek to practically capture and measure uncertainty. The role of uncertainty has featured strongly in much of the economic debate in South Africa, which could have important implications for business confidence and investment in the country. The Northwest University School of Business and Governance launched South Africa's first Policy Uncertainty Index yesterday, and it will be published quarterly by the School of Business and Governance. The first PUI will cover the fourth quarter of 2015. Now, joining us in studio is Professor Raymond Parsons from the Northwest University School of Business and Governance. A very good morning to you, Professor, and welcome.
Good morning, Elvis.
I think our first question basically talks to the index itself and why was it compiled in the first place?
Well, as you rightly said in your opening remarks, the issue of uncertainty in policy has been a major element in the economic debate and in our economic performance over quite a few years. But it's been rather like the elephant in the room. Everyone talks about it in a way, but they don't define it, they don't measure it. And it's also aroused a certain amount of controversy. Well, is it really so bad? But the truth is that we haven't been able to measure it. And if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. So we thought that it was appropriate to look at this gap, because as a small country, we've got a good range of economic indices, both from the public and the private sectors. And we thought here was a gap, that can we find a way to measure this uncertainty in policy and its impact on our economic performance. So in a nutshell, we looked at some of the other countries in the world where they have these indices. So we looked at the best world practice, the best international practice in designing these indexes. And we came up with one for South Africa. It's called the Policy Uncertainty Index. As you've indicated, it will be published quarterly. The one we released yesterday was the first one for the fourth quarter of last year, based on the third quarter of last year, which is the base of 50 points. And it's based on three elements, three major pillars on which it rests. Firstly, we scan the printed media for key words such as uncertainty, recession, the rand, junk rating, all that kind of thing. Secondly, we have a cohort of about 25 economists who fill in a short questionnaire on how they see policy uncertainty. And then thirdly, we draw on the Stellenbosch survey of manufacturers' confidence, which has one question which they don't really capitalize on, dealing with to what extent does politics and policy restrict your business decision making. So those are the three components on which we've launched our index, and we want to see how it unfolds in the next year or so. We hope it will build stature as an important measure of something that we have not looked at in South Africa, but talked about a great deal up until now.
Now, you told us now how it was compiled, but what is the significance of this? And what does the findings say about South Africa? Where do we stand in terms of our
on the basis of 50, we've moved into negative territory up to 55. So that is a spike in our uncertainty, which, if you look at the events of the fourth quarter, is perhaps not surprising, and I don't have to catalogue them all, but of course we had the issue of the changes in the Minister of Finance, we've had the rise in interest rates, we've had the reports of the credit rating agencies and so forth. So quite clearly, from our point of view, in our narrative on the index, we've made it clear that these seem to us to be the major components as to why there's been a spike in this index. We think also that, if you recall, that last week, when he returned from Davos, the president said, I spoke very strongly about policy certainty in South Africa. I assured investors that policy certainty and economic stability were top priorities. And if you take it now that we have got a cabinet lekgotla on the way, I think this is an index whose time has arrived, because although we planned it over a year, I think it's come at the right time to focus our attention, both in the public and the private sectors, on the importance of policy uncertainty as a corrosive element in our economic performance.
How will this index assess business as well as foreign direct investment into the country?
Well, obviously, it will send out a signal. And at the moment, it simply reflects some of the negative perceptions that exist among investors. So it's actually capturing that as one of the elements that has been so often cited by investors. But we need to know more about your road ahead, that you will stick to the road ahead, you will take the tough decisions that are needed to avoid junk status. All that uncertainty is now captured in this index in a more quantifiable way, whereas before they were assertions.
Would this index, the Policy Uncertainty Index, become one of the major indices that we have currently, like the Business Confidence Index and so forth?
I hope it will take its place alongside a whole lot of other analytical tools. We're quite well served in this country with a wide range of these indices, as I said before. But the big gap has been uncertainty. Everyone has been talking about it. We've now offered a tool, an analytical tool, which can take its place alongside all the other indices, and from which people must draw their conclusions. They may not always say the same thing, but the important thing is that we have the fullest information and the fullest knowledge on which both government and the private sector must take their decisions about the future.
And just briefly, Professor, taking from the index, what does it say about South Africa? How do we make this better in terms of coming down to around about 50, where we are now, or where we are now at 55?
Very importantly, just as an index goes up, it can come down. That depends on our choices as a country, what action we take, what decisions we take, how we implement them. And so we've got an opportunity in the first quarter, since this is a quarterly index. The next one will be in the month of April. We'll then, of course, publish it. Will be two important events which can alter and influence perceptions for the better in the future. The one will be, of course, the State of the Nation address by the President. That's the overall leadership message Where is the country going? What are we committed to? Are we going to implement the National Development Plan and so forth? And secondly, of course, the budget, where the fiscal balance is now very important. It's deteriorated since the mini-budget in the fourth quarter. So if the messages from the Minister of Finance are the right ones, those two events can help to influence what our policy uncertainty index might look like for the first quarter of 2016.
Professor, thank you so much for your time and joining us here in studio.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Parsons from the Northwest University School of Business and Governance joining us here, talking about policy uncertainty in the country. But right now, it's over to Evan.
Yes, Sarvis, very important policy uncertainty index, of course, directly linked to the thing we all need in this economy, FDI, foreign direct investment. But we ask you this question today. Would you give money? Oh, that was yesterday's question. Can you please remove that question? Today we're talking about sugar tax. Right, sugar tax. And thank you. Melanie, is that the right one? Is sugar tax an answer to South Africa's obesity problems? Of course, we dealt with it extensively. There were lots of views. What are your views on it? We'd love to hear it at SABC Newsroom. Now, let's move on and take a look at the newspapers from around the African continent today. We'll start in Nigeria. The Daily Trust there reports that the federal government has accused the administration of former President Goodluck Jonathan of procuring substandard weapons to prosecute the fight against Boko Haram insurgency. Then moving to Zimbabwe, the Herald says the Triangle-based sugar milling company Tongaat Hewlett has assured the nation that there are enough stocks of sugar, despite fears that the country was facing a sugar shortage due to drought. Is that a bad thing, we ask on the show today, if there's a shortage of sugar? Then finally, Namibia. The Namibian reports that more than 30 newspaper vendors disrupted the sale of yesterday's papers in Windhoek, demanding that their commission from the Afrikaans daily newspaper be increased by 20 cents per copy. That in itself is interesting. Time now for us to get another weather update with Philip Hawkins.
Yeah, very good morning. Well, let's get straight into the weather. If we take a look, first of all, at today's weather forecast, we're going to start off by looking at the cloud cover. And if you have been watching the weather over the last few weeks, this really is no surprise to you whatsoever. A lot of cloud cover all the way throughout Central Africa. We do have some cloud cover coming in towards the northwestern parts of Africa as well, from the western coastline. Low pressure systems there, bringing that in for today and most likely for tomorrow as well. You can see that pressure system just sitting northwest of the continent there. We're also seeing a lot of rainfall being brought in through the central regions. No surprises there, as we said, but take a look at the intensification of the storm systems off the eastern coastline and, of course, a small ways into the eastern interior of southern Africa as northern regions, as well as Central Africa's southern regions. Now, we are also expecting rainfall through South Africa for today, mostly just isolated showers, but we are expecting slightly more intense rainfall over the southern coastlines of South Africa. In fact, we are expecting 40-kilometre-per-hour winds all the way throughout that southeastern coastline as well. But let's take a look in terms of your temperatures at what's happening today. Port Elizabeth peaks at 28 degrees, Cape Town 27, and Uppington 39 degrees. Now, it is a much more pleasant day in the southwestern parts of South Africa for today. Calvinia peaking nice and pleasant there around the higher 20s, whereas yesterday it was approaching the 40-degree mark. So definitely a much more pleasant outlook in South Africa for today, at least for the western areas. Towards the eastern parts of Central Africa, we're expecting a warm day as well. Kigali's at 27 degrees, a fair amount of cloud cover in that area at the moment. Not raining yet, but we are expecting that rainfall to make its way towards the area very, very shortly. Lilongwe at 26, expecting a lot of that rainfall concentrated in this area. Now, this is where we're going to leave it for now. Be back shortly. Stay tuned.
Morning Live sets the agenda for the day. we bring you the latest local and international news.
We are on the ball with all your sports activities and results.
We give you the latest business update.
We bring you the latest weather every time.
Watch Morning Live every weekday morning at 6 o'clock, bringing you everything you need to know before you go. Sharp, sharp, 8 tada.
Didier Drogba, a footballer from Ivory Coast, was named as the third most influential celebrity in Africa.
Where I saw him display, he's a very nice player. He always make an impact.
Drogba donated his $5 million endorsement fee to the construction of a hospital in Abidjan.
Well, there are some lesser-known football stars in the continent that you haven't met.
Really?
And are deserving of more attention.
I think we will do better.
The Journal, every Saturday at 1:30 on SABC News. As stories are broken around the world, SABC makes sure you do not miss out. As the stories unfold throughout the day, News at 8 updates all newsworthy stories worldwide. Globally, we are there. Locally, we leave no story untold. Make a date with News at 8 every Saturday and Sunday on SABC News, Africa's news leader.
The act of travel is an eye-opening activity that not only expands your view but is a major part of any country's economy. South Africa's spectacular scenery, friendly people and world-class infrastructure make it one of the most desired destinations in the world. Despite tough global economic conditions, the tourism sector is steadily growing. But the idea that one has to go far in order to explore is quickly changing as the sector encourages local exploration. South Africa's history has been one of confrontation, but is now also known as one of reconciliation. World-class sites have been established to commemorate the country's past and celebrate its newfound unity. An area of tourism that is often overlooked is the question of the arts and tourism. Although many cities have not taken advantage of this element to attract international visitors, the domestic artistic tourism is fast becoming a key drawcard for local exploration. A-grade exhibition centers are creating modern spaces to showcase what makes up the African expression. A good dose of creative capital is playing a major role as entrepreneurs create new and exciting ways to sell their products, thus creating new vibrant local spaces that are changing the face of our communities. South Africa has earmarked tourism as a key sector with excellent potential for growth, and a vast amount is being poured into changing the face of our spaces, making them vibrant, urban, and exciting.
Media Monitor, your weekly media news review program.
It was squashed some few months back, but obviously this is something that is going to hang around Pravin until it is actually dealt with. If he didn't know, then he wasn't doing his job.
In it, she described how the man's hair was frozen, although the man has no hair.
Is anybody volunteering to go to jail for him? That is not how the law works.
This particular matter makes us really look like a serious banana republic.
Unpacking headlines and giving analysis on topical issues. Sundays at 9 a.m. only on the SABC News channel.
It's 11 o'clock. It's Monday, in fact, it's Tuesday, 2nd of February 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News, Channel 404. Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the final hour. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock, and you have to stay with us as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. As you know, we're also streaming live on YouTube with the entire show available on your YouTube channel. On our question for the day, we asked you a very important question, and that's got to do with sugar tax. Is sugar tax the answer to South Africa's obesity problems? That's the question. Let us know on your Twitter page, the Twitter handle there at SABC Newsroom. Also, check it out on our Facebook page. Like us on that Facebook page. If you like us there, you become part and parcel of this growing family at SABC News on Newsroom. But first, your headlines. The World Health Organization has declared the Zika virus a global health emergency. More than 200 people are without shelter after several informal structures in Mandela Park in Hout Bay in the Cape Peninsula were destroyed by fire. Protesting workers at the Tshwane University of Technology say they will continue with their action until the institution's management meets them, as other tertiary institutions are busy with Orientation Week. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makhamate what's happening on the sports front. Very good morning.
Good morning, Elvis. Very interesting morning it's been, especially looking at what's happening in terms of the headlines, and that's exactly what I'm going to give you at home as well. Good morning to you. Wheelchair tennis star Lucas Setole arrives back from the Australian Open to a hero's welcome after winning the quad doubles title. All this as Manchester City sealed the deal of the transfer window. They announced that Pep Guardiola will be taken over from Pellegrini in July. In Brazil, the hosts of the Rio 2016 Olympic Games later this year say that Zika poses minimal threat to Olympic athletes and visitors. That's what we've got for you in the sports. Be sure to stick around for that 11:30 or so. Back to you, Elvis.
I like that, with City a pep in their step.
Cool.
Of course, that's Kendall Makhamate with your sports news. You will be back a little bit later. Our top story this hour, a worrying trend. The World Health Organization says a disease linked to the Zika virus in Latin America poses a global public health emergency that's requiring a united response. Experts are worried that the virus is spreading far and wide with devastating consequences. The infection has been linked to cases of microphyly, in which babies are born with underdeveloped brains. The WHO alerts put Zika in the same category of concern as the Ebola virus. Research and aid will be fast-tracked to tackle the infection.
I am now declaring that the recent cluster of microcephaly and other neurological abnormalities reported in Latin America, following a similar cluster of French Polynesia in 2014, constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. As a precautionary measure, and because of the association, a coordinated international response is needed to improve surveillance, the detection of infections, congenital malformations, the detection of neurological complications, to intensify the control of mosquito populations, and to expedite the development of diagnostic tests and vaccines to protect people at risk.
More than 200 people are without shelter after several informal structures in Mandela Park at Hout Bay in the Cape Peninsula were destroyed by fire. No injuries have been reported, and the cause of the blaze is not yet known. 5 fire trucks and 23 firefighters responded to the flames. More than 60 wood and iron structures were gutted. The city's Human Settlements Department say it's providing fire kits for residents to rebuild their shacks. The South African Red Cross Society is also expected to provide hot meals and blankets for those in need. Protesting workers at the Tshwane University of Technology say that they will continue with their action until the institution's management meets with them. Yesterday, police had to fire stun grenades as the workers blocked students' access to the campus. Higher Education Minister Bladen Nzimande has blamed political opportunists for hijacking student and worker protest at universities.
Steadfast in their demand for more money and permanent jobs. They barred students from accessing the campus, and when police tried to assist them, chaos. More scuffles between police and the EFF Student Command.
No, but I'm respecting you.
No one is going to work here, and those who defy us, we will deal with them. Some students baffled and destitute.
Workers have vowed to shut down all campuses if their demands are not met. While the start of the academic year plunged into disarray.
People, it's a mess inside. People are not even working. We've been coming here since 4 a.m.
Last week, these workers rejected a 5,000 rand wage increase and outsourcing over 3 years.
It is our position as management and organized labor and the students that we have reflected quite critically on the plight of our workers, and this is the best that we can do for our workers.
Higher Education blames a third force for the class disruptions.
We think what's happening at the TUT is some political parties who are launching their local government elections campaign.
Nzimande urged workers to return to work. Crisalda Lewis, SABC News, in Pretoria.
Meanwhile, lawyers for 43 Cape Peninsula University of Technology students are expected to bring an urgent application in the Western Cape High Court this morning, seeking an amendment to their bail applications. The students are out on bail of 3,000 rand each. Now, they face charges of public violence and malicious damage to property relating to the fee protests in November last year. Their bail conditions prevent them from entering the campus.
Their alleged involvement in the Fees Must Fall campaign is now threatening their academic careers. Despite being granted bail last year, they are yet to see the inside of a lecture hall, and they are under strict bail conditions. Now, their legal counsel is turning to the court to intervene and have the conditions amended.
The circumstances have changed. It's 2016 now. There's not been any Fees Must Fall protest. There's not been any vandalism to any property. And so now it only makes sense that the bail conditions must be amended because those students have to go back on campus.
Students fear their academic careers are in limbo. The university says it is monitoring the court case and will only comment once it has been concluded. Carmel Lochmerg-Roberts, SABC News, Cape Town.
To the U.S. now, U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump has congratulated the Texas Senator Ted Cruz for his win in the Iowa Republican caucuses. Trump says that he is honored by the second-place finish. Meanwhile, Democrat Martin O'Malley, the former Maryland governor, has told the BBC that he will suspend his campaign, narrowing the field to 2 competitive candidates. U.S. Senator Ted Cruz beat the billionaire Donald Trump in Iowa's Republican presidential nominating contest. Cruz, a conservative lawmaker from Texas, won with 28% of the vote compared to 24% for the businessman Donald Trump. Marco Rubio, a U.S. senator from Florida, came in third with 23%. On the Democratic side, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is in a virtual tie with rival Bernie Sanders, a self-described Democratic Socialist U.S. Senator from Vermont. The vote count stands at roughly 50% to each candidate, with 95% of the state's precincts reporting results. Sanders has already declared a tie for the Democratic race.
The Republicans announced their winner several hours ago, but there is this dead heat. They're calling it a virtual tie, really just a percentage points between the two of them. There are some precincts still to declare, so we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there. But for Hillary Clinton, it means that obviously she didn't get the big win she was hoping for. And if you look ahead to the next vote, which will be in New Hampshire, now Bernie Sanders is expected to win that quite easily because he is the senator of the neighbouring state of Vermont. That would mean that he would have won or come very close to the first two primaries and caucuses, which would be something of a setback for Hillary Clinton. She's hoping not to repeat what happened in 2008, where she didn't come first in Iowa. She came third to Barack Obama, and of course Barack Obama then went on to get the nomination and eventually the presidency. So a setback for Hillary Clinton, but this dead heat at the moment still means that both candidates have a good shot of getting this Democrat nomination.
Well, it was a tie, but that's old news. News just in. Hillary Clinton has won the Iowa nominating contest in the U.S. presidential election. That's breaking news right here on Newsroom, your channel of choice, SABC News. Now, earlier today, we focused on a very interesting and important topic of sugar and sugar tax. According to the World Health Organization, at least 41 million children under the age of 5 are obese or overweight globally. And South Africa are expected to have more than 9 million obese people by 2017. We spoke to several experts on the issue.
The report aims to highlight the problem of obesity and overweight in children, particularly children under 5, which, as you have just mentioned, has increased dramatically. And this increase is being driven by low and middle income countries. The problem, as you have already stated, is really the environment. We're living in environments where there are more and more processed foods. These processed foods are cheaper in many cases than healthier alternatives. We have aggressive and sophisticated marketing techniques, particularly towards children, to increase consumption of these energy-dense, high-fat, high-sugar foods. As well as we have an environment where people have insufficient information to make food choices. So, for example, the nutrition labeling tends to be small, difficult to read, and even more difficult to interpret. So these factors have really created an environment that we call an obesogenic environment, and an environment that encourages increased consumptions of foods that are unhealthy.
That there is high sugar content in a lot of these drinks, even fruit juices, so not only your cold drinks. We need to drink less of them. We need to drink more water. We need clearer, simpler labeling on the products so we know what there is in them. We need worksite and school interventions where healthier products are made easily available. We want the healthy choice to become the easier choice, and currently the food environment makes it very difficult. We have advertising that really targets especially low and middle income countries where it's growing, targeting sugar-sweetened beverage consumption. So we need advertising regulations as well.
It would be appropriate if you could maybe demystify sugar tax a little bit for us, what it is, how it works, and what its aims are, I would think.
Yeah. Well, it's a fairly simple tax. It's an excise tax. Excise taxes are basically behavioral taxes. So we have tobacco, we have alcohol, and we're all sin taxes. Just the answer. Now the question is when you buy something, you just add the charge. Now the question is, where do you add the charge? Do you add a charge at the consumer level when you go and buy it in the store, like a value-added tax, or do you charge it down the stream when the business buys the sugar? So it's really a very simple tax. It's a gross purchase tax. That's all it is.
How do you expect this to affect the wider industry?
It depends where the tax falls. So if you put the tax on certain drinks at the consumer level, what will happen is people go to the cheaper drinks. So you might have the, whatever, you raise the price, people go to the worst sodas. That's all they'll do. And they'll continue drinking as before. So all you're doing is bringing it from the high to the low. If you put it on the intermediate goods and you raise it across the board, well, maybe that'll have a slightly different effect. But really the problem is sugar. It can be in your cake. It can be everywhere. It can be in, I was having yogurt last night. That sounds healthy, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of sugar in that.
Yeah, lots of it.
I think the point is if you're going to go after sugar, you got to go across the board. You can't just target the drink industry.
What we suggest is that, that there ought to be an advisory council appointed to do with healthy lifestyles. It's about healthy lifestyles. And we're proposing that government appoints an advisory council on healthy lifestyles. And this council, consisting of all the specialists in this area, nutritionists, scientists, and other specialists in this area, gives advice to the Minister of Health in terms of promoting a healthy lifestyle, gives advice to the Minister of Sport in terms of exercise, gives advice to the Minister of Cooperative Development so that municipalities would create outside gyms so that people have exercise opportunities, especially in working class and poor neighborhoods. We need to have a balanced approach in terms of the food we consume, and we have to work with the right people in order to get that done, and it can be voluntary. In the U.S., the Beverage Association agreed to withdraw sugar-sweetened drinks from schools. We need to do the same thing here. It's so easy to just, there's a vending machine at every school selling Coke. That shouldn't happen. We can't force people, but I do believe in terms of what happens at schools that there ought to be a withdrawal of sugar-sweetened, soda pop that's so easily available. So we do that, focus on schools, focus on exercise, and create an advisory council to advise ministers in terms of what to do. And I think an advisory council with the right group of experts can give good advice to ministers in terms of what programs they ought to follow in terms of diet. By that I mean nutrition, advice about the best nutrition, advice about how to get exercise going in an organized way that matters, and to withdraw the availability of sugar-sweetened drinks from school premises.
Sugar has been pointed as the demon in the overall picture. How much sugar is healthy to have in our diets, and how are we doing then here in South Africa, Jessica?
So the World Health Organization recommends that we should be having no more than about 10% of our total energy intake should be coming from sugary foods and drinks. And so that equates to about 12 teaspoons of sugar a day. And just remember that that's sugar that you're adding to tea and coffee and cereals, as well as the sugar that's already added to a lot of food. So, for example, in your sugar-sweetened beverages, in cereals, desserts, baked products, etc. And just to put that into perspective, a 330 ml can of a fizzy cool drink, for example, actually contains about 8 teaspoons of sugar just in that one can alone. So that already, is adding almost all of the sugar that you should be having in a day. And in terms of South Africa and looking at our intake, there's various studies that show that we're eating between 50 to 100 grams of sugars a day, so far above that 12 teaspoons of sugar recommendation.
Now, it's a very important topic and a very important question that we ask you in relation to obesity and sugar and everything that we do on a daily basis. And we're asking you then, is sugar tax the answer to our obesity problems in this country? Some mentioned an explosion in our country. Well, we'll take a short break and we'll be back after that.
AKA went overseas to win 2 awards for himself for Best South African Male Artist and a second one for his hit track All Eyes on Me. The Lamb film is nominated for Best Foreign category at the 2016 Oscars.
We couldn't find finance until the script won a very prestigious prize in France.
Dr. Pascal has inspired many in song and theatre presentation.
And in 1985, when I came, I went to the SABC on the radio, and I was the voice of Africa.
Catch Trends every Friday at 9 p.m.
Welcome back to Newsroom. Now we're continuing with our theme of sugar tax, diet and obesity, even here in our regional slot this morning. Now, traditionally known as the City of Roses, the city of Bloemfontein has a reputation for friendly, fun-loving people. Well, it looks set to gain a new and not so complimentary reputation, as a health report says that Bloemfontein is the most unhealthy and obese city in the country. That, according to the Discovery Vitality report.
Bloemfontainers have the most weight issues, the lowest fruit and veg intake, the highest sugary drink and salt intake, and the second lowest physical activity rate. Could this be true?
I disagree with it, definitely. But all thing I can say is we love the clubs, we love the women, so I guess that makes us lazy.
Yes, these days most of the people in Bloemfontein, particularly men, they're having a very big bellies.
Because they eat so much, and the food that you buy here, it's fat like this.
A quick look around the city proves inconclusive, but not everyone is in top physical shape. Is this to be the legacy of the city that produced the likes of Ryk Neethling and Wade van Niekerk?
Yeah, part of the things that we want to encourage is good health as the city, because we understand that that investment is going to serve the city in long term.
The city obviously can't appeal against this not-so-rosy revelation, so it's up to the residents of the city to ensure that they save their health and the city's reputation.
You can't just do diet and not exercise, or just exercise and do diet. There has to be a balance between the two.
So it's clear that healthy eating and exercise can't just be a New Year's resolution that normally falls flat. It's time for Bloemfontainers to cut the kilos and to start getting physical. Richard Newton, SABC News, Bloemfontein.
What a nice report there from Richard Newton. Now, he talks about the Discovery Vitality report. It says Bloemfontein people have the most weight issues. They eat the least amount of fruits and vegetables. They have the highest intake of sugary drinks and salt. The report also says Bloemfontein has the second lowest rate of physical activity. Many residents agreed with this report. Now, dietitian Dr. Lucia Meko says it's essential as a nation to lower the number of people affected by non-communicable diseases such as diabetes, hypertension, and of course heart disease. Now, Dr. Meko joins us in our Bloemfontein studio this morning to take this a little bit further. Good morning to you, Doctor. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. It's a pleasure.
Just critically interrogate this report a little bit. Is Bloemfontein the fattest, laziest, biggest eaters in the country?
Well, we can't say for certain that that statement can be generalized to the whole of Bloemfontein, because of the fact that the Discovery study was done only on a subsection of the population and mainly focused on your middle to high income groups. And so if we look at our national studies, they actually reveal something quite different. For example, with the high income cities being a little bit more overweight than our sort of almost rural cities and provinces.
The disturbing thing that came out of the report, it says Bloemfontein people eat less fruit and vegetables than the rest of the country, and they have a higher intake of sugar and salt. What does that cause?
This is a trend across South Africa where we find that there's been changes in what we eat and how we eat. And as one of your speakers said earlier, it is mainly due to the environment that we find ourselves in, that these are the foods that, for example, your high fat and high sugar foods are the ones that are more available and sometimes even more affordable than your cheaper or your healthier fruits and vegetables. Other than that, there's a problem in terms of the preparations that goes with fruit, especially vegetables, that sort of puts people off of consuming them to some degree.
Now, I'm sure what's happening in Bloemfontein is just a little window into what's happening in South Africa, but also the wider world. Now, the Center for Diabetes, they say that we're sitting on a diabetes tsunami here in South Africa if we don't change our ways. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I totally agree with that. If you look at statistics about in the year 2000, for example, and looking at the burden of disease, diabetes didn't even make it to the top 10 of the leading causes of death in South Africa. And currently, when we look at the burden of disease studies conducted by the MRC, we find that diabetes is featuring at number 8 and number 9, and it's slowly rising in terms of causes of death amongst people, and it's mainly due to the changes in our dietary practices.
Talking about the changes in those dietary practices, what do we construe in today's world as a healthy diet? You know, I feel like I've been on a diet for 30 years, and I feel now, 30 years later, I should really know what I'm doing. But with every fad that comes every year, I don't know. I'm more lost now than I was when I was 25.
And that's exactly the problem. I think as people, we need to go back to the basics. We tend to listen to people that are all, yes, people out there that are not really qualified to provide information and the correct scientific information on what exactly is healthy eating. The other thing is, if we do not look at it as a diet and rather look at it as a healthy lifestyle, that actually becomes more sustainable. The problem with fad diets, for example, is that it's something that you can only do for so long, and after a while a person gets bored with that. So the important thing is to go back to the basics, your fruit and vegetables, your low intake of high-fat foods, to actually look at your portion sizes of different types of foods, particularly your starch groups and your proteins, your meats, your fish, to actually increase a little bit more of our milk intake. For example, we're finding that very few people are consuming milk on a daily basis, and it has been found to assist in maintaining a healthy lifestyle. And then another thing that we want to encourage is the inclusion of your legumes, your beans, your lentils. Those are the healthier fiber types that also help to protect against diseases such as diabetes and so forth, and also help in controlling and maintaining weight. So essentially it's about going back to the basics and actually trying to turn a blind eye to each and every fad that comes in.
Well, Dr. Meko, we could carry on with this discussion for a long while still, because I promise you I'm totally lost. I know now we could eat more fat and more meat. The doctor says don't eat less fat. Tim Noakes says eat meat and fat and don't eat starch. If you're like me, then you must be a little bit confused as to what is a healthy diet in the new world. Going back to basics probably makes the most sense, one would think. Now we move on, of course, to Parliament. Parliament says its new rules for joint sittings have prepared Party for any eventuality. Now this comes ahead of President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address next week. Last year, Parliament's official opening nearly descended into chaos when EFF MPs disrupted the President's speech.
Honourable members behaving dishonourably. It's not a scene Parliament wants to ever see again. So MPs spent the better part of last year writing new rules for joint sittings. These are now in effect, and Parliament's administrators believe they have everything in place for an uneventful evening.
Our plans are in place in that regard, and we are not expecting basically any mishaps.
The new rules won't allow any member to speak on any point of order or privilege unless they are invited or have sought prior permission to do so.
So we have got the Powers, Privileges and Immunities of Parliament Act, which states what matters of privilege are. And a point of privilege has to relate to the provisions of that act. Anything outside of this would not constitute either a point of privilege or a point of order.
Meanwhile, Ngidlana says they have not recruited any new security personnel. He also has Intelligence Minister David Mahlobo's word that there won't be any signal scrambling devices smuggled into Parliament this time around.
We have to do things within the law, right? And in this instance, what we're expecting from all agencies is to act and within the ambit of the law, as it were. And that assurance is there.
Gidlana and his staff plan to hold regular update meetings on their preparations in the build-up to February 11th, when President Jacob Zuma will deliver his 2016 State of the Nation address. Lukhanyo Khalada, SABC News, Parliament.
Yes, our parliamentary reporter Lukhanyo Khalada attended this media briefing yesterday. He joins us now in our parliamentary studio. Very good morning to you, Lukhanyo. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Eben.
Now, on a point of order, it seems the outcomes were quite clear yesterday.
Very much. I think Parliament wants to send a message, Eben, that it is not going to tolerate any sort of behavior that may be disruptive to the events of that evening. They were very, very quick to stress yesterday that next week, Thursday, the State of the Nation address is called essentially by the President. It's a joint sitting of the House, and it is to allow for the President to deliver his State of the Nation address. Anything other than the President delivering his State of the Nation address is out of order and will not be allowed. So a very strong message has been sent very early on in the year, and obviously, based on what happened last year, your guess is as good as mine as to what we can expect next week, Thursday. Eben.
These new rules, or these amended rules, they were, of course, formulated in the presence of all parties, and all parties must have had some buy-in. Have you heard or have you mentioned to be in contact with the EFF, and what do they say? Will they comply?
Look, Eben, the EFF was part of the amending of the rules last year. For them, however, when we spoke to them a few weeks ago, when Parliament, in the beginning of the year, what they said to us was that they have got a few things that they would like to run past the President. And one of those is essentially the issue of the dismissal of former Finance Minister Nhlanhla in December last year. And seeing that this will be the first opportunity that they have to engage with the President, they said to us that chances are that they won't allow that opportunity to go begging. Now, obviously, we've seen last year what the EFF, what they were prepared to do. It seems like they're prepared to do the exact same thing this year. This, despite obviously the rules, the new rules being in effect. There were rules last year too, in which the party just, simply ignored. The rules are now tougher, they are tighter, and let's wait and see whether or not the EFF will be able to make good on its threat to actually take President Jacob Zuma on and ask him about the dismissal of former Finance Minister Nhlanhla.
Yeah, I think the nation is awaiting a little bit with bated breath on that one. But now, security updates, none have been put forward, if one can say that, thus far. Will Parliament be ready for any eventuality then, in your opinion?
That's what they said yesterday, Eben. They said that they will be ready, using those exact words, they will be ready for any eventuality. They were asked in the briefing whether or not, they've recruited any new members. They replied in the negative, saying they have not recruited any new members. However, what the Secretary did say was that the members that were recruited last year have obviously since been through continuous training, and they obviously will be a lot more prepared this year in terms of, should they be called into the chamber, what they could do, how swiftly they move in, how they essentially enclose, how they remove MPs if it comes to that. So, they are better prepared than they were last year. I think also Parliament, by hosting this press conference yesterday and by saying that, look, we've got these rules and we won't be afraid to enforce them. I think what they're doing is essentially just to clear the ground, to say that any form of disruption, anything that is outside of the core business of that evening, we will deal with it, and we will deal with it in a very harsh way, and we are prepared to do so. Eben.
Quickly, Lekanyo, we're just more than a week away from the 2016 State of the Nation address. Have you got an idea of the rundown towards the date?
Eben, it's always the same, you know. Parliament is the guys, the contractors are starting to move in. They're starting to you know, clear the last year's dirt, if I can put it like that. Starting to spray the place, starting to paint the place, and obviously the MPs will start. You know, committees have started sitting from today onwards. And more committees will start sitting as the week progresses. Next week, obviously, then the MPs will start, the party bigwigs will start coming into town. Government ministers will arrive into town. There will be the usual, you know, the usual meets and the usual greets to get the year underway. You know, we do expect from next week onwards to start reporting on the dress rehearsals by the armed forces, you know, as Parliament gets ready for what is obviously the biggest day in our calendar here in Parliament. And then, you know, hopefully everything will go smooth on the night, and then we can essentially focus on what is essentially a roadmap for the country that the president then lays out in the beginning of the year to say that these are our plans as government. This is what we want to achieve in this coming year. This is what we achieved last year. This is where we could not get to, but we will get to hopefully in this year, you know, and then followed a few days later by the budget speech to essentially then put the rands and cents to the issues, to the programs that will be addressed by the president. Once we're hoping that we will have a State of the Nation free of mishaps, because obviously it is in the best interest of the country for us to have that. Eben.
Lekanyo, thank you very much for that update. That's our man in Parliament, parliamentary reporter Lekanyo Kalata, giving us an update ahead of course, the SONA, the SONA address, State of the Nation address here in South Africa. That happens on the 11th. That's next week, Thursday. Time for us to take a break. Don't go away. Kendall will be back with sport shortly.
Get all the latest news from the SABC's online news services on our website. Breaking news and in-depth coverage of everything from business, sports to politics and lifestyle. Catch the top news clips and watch live streaming of major news events on the SABC News YouTube channel whenever. Stay connected on the SABC News Facebook page and have your say on news that matters to you. And for the latest headlines and live updates from our reporters, follow us on Twitter. SABC Digital News, anytime, anywhere.
Controlesa is actually stirring the pot here.
I'm sure they've been consulted as Controlesa. They did not see a snake. Now that in certain areas there are certain benefits that might possibly be accruing, there is a snake, now we need to reverse the process.
I agree, but it is not above the sovereignty of the people. The very same court you're talking about.
The sovereignty of the people, probably you should explain that to me.
The sovereignty of the people is above everything.
It is not proper the way facts are presented to the public. Are you in contact with Khosekgolo Motshodi?
He was kicked out by the court because he wanted to be amicus curiae.
For your weekly dose of all things legal, join Dumile Mateza every Sunday at 2 p.m. only on SABC News Channel.
Welcome back. I'm Kendall Makhamat. I've got your sports on Newsroom. Top story in this hour. In what some call the coup of the transfer window, the most sought-after football coach in the world, Spaniard Pep Guardiola, has signed a 3-year contract to take over as Manchester City manager in July. Manuel Pellegrini will leave the job on June the 30th to make way for Guardiola, who joins after 3 seasons at Bayern Munich in Germany.
Pellegrini's contract ran until 2017, but he announced today that he will step down at the end of the season. The 45-year-old Guardiola will replace Pellegrini, who will leave on June the 30th. A statement from City said the 62-year-old Pellegrini was fully supportive of the announcement being made. At the time he was in charge, Pellegrini led City to a domestic title in the same year. Pellegrini replaced Roberto Mancini in 2013 and took them to a Premier League and League Cup double the following season. He has won 64 of his 99 league games as a manager, a record that is only eclipsed by Jose Mourinho, who won 73 of his opening 99 league games as Chelsea manager.
Before we finish, I'll tell you that I talked with the club and I finished my contract in the original date, on June. We extend the contract 1 year more, but with a clause that one of the club or me can not use that extent of contract. So I finish here in the original date, the 30th of June. So not a speculation about things. They are not doing nothing behind me. I know this 1 month ago, but I don't think it's good to this rumor and speculation about different things. I prefer to finish today. That's why I told the press, I told the players, and I spoke with the club 2 weeks ago that I will do it.
Guardiola has signed a 3-year contract to take over as manager in July, according to a statement released by City. Guardiola, who won 14 titles with Barcelona in his 4-year coaching spell, had turned down a contract extension at Bayern late last year after winning back-to-back league titles and being on course for a 3rd straight Bundesliga crown.
Now, the Minister of Sport and Recreation of South Africa, Fikile Mbalula, was at the OR Tambo International Airport to welcome Lucas Sithole, who returned from his successful Australian Open campaign. Lucas Sithole won the wheelchair tennis squad doubles title in Melbourne.
Star Lucas Sithole may not have won the quad singles title at the Australian Open, but the 29-year-old still made the nation proud. The defending South African champion became the first African to win both quad single and double Grand Slam titles in their careers. Sithole, who has his sight on a medal at the 2016 Rio Paralympic Games, says the Grand Slam title was a moral boost ahead of the global showpiece in Brazil.
All in all, I'm very happy the way I played there. It shows that I'm on a right path since preparing for Rio 2016. That's my goal since this year started. My coach is my witness. He knows.
With the financial backing from the airport company South Africa, our tennis players did the country proud in the quad division in Australia. Minister of Sports Fikile Mbalula maintains it will go a long way in putting the disabled athletes on the map.
Kothatso and Lucas and Oscar Pistorius, leave alone what he did later on. They changed the face in the world of people to believe in the sport of people with disability.
Joseph Mohali, SABC News.
And so the Australian Open is over. As one champion was denied, another was confirmed as the best in a generation. But the first Grand Slam of the year was more than just about Serena and Novak. It was also about the likes of South African quad tennis champion Lucas Sithole, who won his second Grand Slam there when he bagged a quad doubles title. Simon Burke had tennis promoter Bruce Davidson in studio last night.
Fantastic effort by Lucas, playing with David Wagner, who was his arch rival for so many years on the circuit. There's some new kids on the block coming through, which is making it very difficult for David Wagner, who dominated for so long. And Lucas obviously would like to move from number 3. So a good win in the doubles, I'm glad. Alcock, who won the singles, is going to be a force to reckon with going forward. But I think Lucas has got it in him, but fantastic that he's on the podium.
And where does Lucas stand now in his sport? Because he wasn't so great in the singles, but this was obviously the platform that he announced himself at the US Open a couple of years ago, winning his first ever slam.
Yeah, I think, Lucas has been through a bit of a challenging year. He got married. He's been very focused on some of his music. It's been good for him in many ways. Now all of a sudden he's back and he's number 3 in the world. The latest rankings came out, and Lucas will always be Lucas. Twist is his nickname. He's going to I think there's a lot more to come from Lucas.
And then obviously Lucas was joined by another success story, Khokhatso Monjani. She made it all the way through to the quarters in the singles, and also threatened quite a bit in the doubles in the lead-up to the Aussie Open, at the Melbourne Open. Not quite able to deliver in the Aussie Open, but still somebody also to look out for nowadays.
Fantastic. KG's been in the top 8 of the world. She slipped a little bit beginning of last year, but, you know, she's been in the top 8, and I think that there's a lot more to come from KG. Something I think she just needs to believe a little bit more in herself. She had a fantastic win against the world number 2 leading up to the Australian Open, won that doubles, as you said, with Ella Brock. And I really believe KG, we haven't seen the best yet of KG, and her coach, Charles Galoche, told me the same thing. So let's see what happens. But it's tough out there.
It is, and also, I mean, they had to get all the way out to Australia, and it's just the beginning of the season for a lot of them. What's the resources like for a player of her caliber? Can she sustain this? Can she go to the events that she needs to be at to make the world rankings?
Definitely. You know, Wheelchair Tennis South Africa are one of the leaders in wheelchair tennis organisations in the world, and they've got Airports Company South Africa backing them all the way. And so when you've got some good money and you've got a good organisation, the world's your oyster. So I think the players like Evans Maripa, KG Manjani, Lucas Satola have got really a great opportunity, and there's Dlamini's coming through. There's a lot of Mariska Fenter, a lot of great up-and-coming juniors. So I think the future looks bright.
And I mean, obviously, as us as South Africans, we always were looking for one name, because we only literally had one name to look for whenever there was a slam on the go, and that was Kevin Anderson, but he didn't do that great anymore. Do you see the tide is changing for him, or is this was just a temporary blip for him?
No, he's injured. He's in New Zealand at the moment treating that injury. He'll be starting on the 8th of February, and his coach, Neville Godwin, is back in South Africa just taking a break. He'll be back. He only slipped 2 spots in the world ranking that came out today, and there's lots more to come from Kevin. But he's taking precautions because it's the start of the year, and he doesn't. But it was disappointing.
So he slips down to 14th in the world now. Okay.
But that's still good.
Yeah, no,
it's unbelievable.
It is, but it seems like he hits a ceiling. It used to be Burdech, and now it's just. I think he broke through the round of 4, the 4th round, but. Is there that impetus that can he get into the latter rounds? Is there a place for him in his game in modern tennis?
Definitely. He has got one of the biggest serves in the game. He moves very well for a big guy, and all the players say when the draw comes out, they all wonder where Kevin Anderson is, and that's huge respect for him. And I think there's he's coming of age, but South Africans develop late. So I really believe that Kevin Anderson can do something, and I believe he's going to break into the top 10.
And then another player who made some waves was Raven Klaasen. He also came good, and Rajiv Ram together. They did quite well in the doubles.
Fantastic. Get to the quarterfinals. I mean, Raven has been in the finals before, and it's 5 years ago Raven was going to quit. It's just amazing how he's just come back. He's a fiery fella, and I'm glad that he's found a partner in Rajiv Ram, a solid guy. And together they're doing so well, and it's nice that they've got a touring coach with him, Jeff Coetzee, South African, as well as Stefan de Kock, who's his home coach. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more, because some of the guys are winning at 40. Daniel Lester wins titles at 40, so Raven's still got quite a bit to go.
South Africans, we've got more to look forward to. Team South Africa, they're going to be up against it in the Fed Cup. They were drawn against the number 2 seeds, Great Britain, as well as Georgia. Just a quick synopsis there. What can we expect? Are our girls fighters in this respect?
It's a very tough one. We were in Group 2 last year. We had Shani Skeepers playing for us. She won all her matches. She was ranked in the top 120 of the world. So it was quite a nice, comfortable promotion. Now Shani's quit. So now we've got a team that's very solid, very determined. Earl Granger and Alan Karam, who are both there with the girls, said to me that they're absolutely motivated, but it is tough. Group 1's tough. And Great Britain is number 2 seeds. Not easy.
Not at all.
But Joanna's not playing.
I saw that one.
And she got to the semis of the Australian Open, so that's a bit of a relief. They got Georgia in their pool. Georgia they could beat, very similar ranked. And Georgia don't like the hard courts like the South Africans do, and it is hard courts in Israel. So let's see what happens.
So you're saying there is a smidgen of hope for us?
A smidgen of hope to go through to the qualifying, but let's try and stay in Group 1 because that's important. Let's not slip back to Group 2.
Exactly where we wouldn't leave it with the sport. But even a little earlier, we had this question about the question of the day.
Yeah, we have lots of traction, lots of dozens and dozens of tweets. Yeah, we love the fact that you interact with us. We're going to take a look at a few. Of course, we asked, is sugar tax a solution to South Africa's obesity problem, Elvis?
Well, this one from Lingisondo says, I like it or not, like it or not, obesity is a big problem in our country. Maybe this tax will have an effect in curbing the problem somewhat.
And Lynn reckons by implementing tax on sugar, it's not going to stop obesity. All the government is doing is trying to make more money.
Yeah,
cynical,
so,
that.
That's a rather cynical view, but the final word. Joe Maila, you're watching us. You should come to the show, Joe. Anyhow, the policy of the NDOH is to have school tuck shops to sell healthy food, not junk and sugary foods.
And that is a problem. It's a serious problem with schools just selling kids everything that's, in the rack there with all the sugar there. Christian Kleinans says sugar of any kind, definitely the culprit. Banting is the answer. But tax will hit people hard. High fat, no sugar in yogurts, etc. So says Christian.
Komotsa Mahapi says, new start is our approach to healthy people. Nutrition, exercise, water, sunshine, temperance, air, rest, and trust.
Sounds like a yoga.
Yeah, it's
final word again. The NDOH, we've had this one, haven't we?
To reconsider the placement of sugary items on the way to cashiers. Yes, Woolworths, you need to change that. Please don't move those. Put all the sweets next to the tills where you have to queue and look at it for minutes on end. I know those minutes are long, Elvis.
I tell you, and we need to definitely take this forward. So we're going to talk more about sugar and sugar taxes and how it affects you and what sort of sugars and in the different foods and so on.
How many
so
sugars do you take in your coffee?
Well, I used to take 3. I promise you I take 1 now. And I'm getting to the point where I'll probably end up with nothing by the end of this year.
Elvis doesn't have obesity problem. So anyhow, that's where we leave it. We'll see you again tomorrow. Tomorrow, well, we'll look ahead to the election in our theme, so that should be interesting in itself. We'll see you then.
Ciao for now. Arrivederci.